Wolo and Stats. The first hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Lexus of Memphis. Here are your hosts, the voice of the Tigers, Dave Woloshin and Brett Stats Norsworthy.
Good Monday afternoon. Nice to be back after a little break. It is nice that we have an unbelievable first game of a quad header on ESPN when it comes to NBA hoops. There are maybe fractions of a second left, 115, 115. The Jazz, the Nuggets, looks like they're going to overtime. It is over now. They're tied at 115. This is a Utah team playing without Mike Conley today, who left the bubble to have or to be with when his wife had a son. So he's got a baby boy, and his team is hanging in there without him. Donovan Mitchell in this game with 49 points in regulation. So we are underway with the NBA playoffs. We are certainly underway with the NHL playoffs. Those things have worked. High school football is supposed to start this Friday, believe it or not, this Friday, with two big games for this area for sure. Christian Brothers at Houston and Briarcrest at Collierville. The numbers, I'll give them to you in a little bit, are getting better and better. As far as it comes to COVID, we learned this morning there is a new saliva test that doctors are saying can be a game changer. Cheap, more readily available. Maybe the Big Ten will reconsider. There's a petition out from Justin Fields, the quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes. He put out this petition wanting the Big Ten to reconsider. And as of this morning, I think in 24 hours, he had 220,000 or so signees of this petition. So who knows what will happen with all of that, but there is certainly a little bit more positivity this week than there was when I left a couple of weeks ago. By the way, Brett Norsworthy off for the next couple of weeks. Filling in will be Drew Barrett. He is the co-host, and filling in for Drew as the engineer is Carl Morris. We are underway on a lot of different fronts, Drew.
Oh, yeah, we are. And, I'd like to know that the numbers are going in the right direction. It was a little worrisome last week as a lot of high schools are still not even close to contact or even using a football, and we're on the week of game week for a lot of high schools, and it's good to know that numbers are looking good, that we might, all the college conferences that have held out thus far, the 6 that are still planning to play are going to, as of right now, look like it's going to happen. So as long as the data shows that we can do it, then let's do it. But, I don't want to push it too far. If it's even iffy, I think we've got to pull back a bit.
I know this. We had talked about in the past, schools shouldn't play if students weren't there. And I've gone 180 on this, and I'm going to tell you why. If you look at the University of Memphis where students have not shown up yet, those players that came, there's never been COVID there. But in situations where schools brought student athletes in for practice or for training, when they arrived, they came from all different walks of the country, some overseas for that matter, and so there were bound to be some COVID outbreaks, and there were. But then once they were in isolation in their so-called bubbles, if that's what we're going to call it, when they were not mingling with other people, all those went away, and we haven't had real outbreaks that I can think of until students came back. If you saw Alabama, they came back and they were not following some rules for this fraternity, sorority, rush kind of thing. I wouldn't be shocked if any of the athletes that are football players got involved with those kids. You might have outbreaks. If you are staying with a virtual student campus and only student athletes in their own bubbles are abiding by the rules and being disciplined about this, maybe we can have this thing. I know the SEC is clearly thinking they're going to go ahead with this on this 26th because they announced today their opening weekend. They're going to announce their full schedule as we get off the air at 6 o'clock today. But the opening weekend will be Alabama at Missouri. That's a nightmare for Missouri's Eli Drinkwitz. His first game as the football head coach at Missouri has to be against Nick Saban's Alabama team, but at least it's at home. Florida goes to Ole Miss, so Lane Kiffin got a tough assignment, but at least he is at home. Georgia is at Arkansas, so Sam Pittman gets a tough one, even though he is at home.
Not making it very easy on the new guys.
No. Kentucky is at Auburn, Mississippi State. Mike Leach, first year in that league, he's got to go to defending national champion LSU. Not easy. Tennessee will open in South Carolina. Vandy will play at Texas A&M. That is the opening weekend for the SEC. As far as the Tigers are concerned, it's still on go for September the 5th, Arkansas State in the Liberty Bowl against the Tigers. I do not think we have totally settled on a number with spacing and how many people will be allowed. I guess at this point it is still the 12 feet spacing. So you're looking at about 4,000, 4,500 that will be in the ballpark. We are going to touch base with a lot of people on a lot of these different subjects as the week unfolds. We will have Ryan Silverfield with us at 4:30 on Thursday. So we'll find out exactly how that is going and a little insight tomorrow with Gabe Kuhn at 3:30 when he joins us to talk about the Tigers in practice thus far.
Yeah, it seems like the Tigers are pushing through. From all reports, practice has been going well. Everything seems to be on schedule. And while you're right, we're mostly doing virtual learning. I do know some students have moved into campus. Some of my friends' younger siblings started their freshman years this year, and one's just moved into Centennial. The other one's it just moved into the LLC. But while they are allowing students to move back, it still won't be the same amount of congregation and just people mingling throughout the campus on the way to classes or hanging out in the UC and stuff like that. So you are right on your front that it ultimately will be easier because you're just not interacting. And we've seen stuff from universities throughout the country. I saw a video earlier today from the University of North Georgia. First night that they had students back looked to be a congregation of about 300 to 400 people in a neighboring neighborhood around the campus because, regardless of how bad this thing is, and we all know how bad COVID-19 and this global pandemic is, I'm not going to put my trust in my faith, and I'm definitely not going to bet on 18 to 21-year-olds making smart decisions and staying 6 feet apart from each other.
That you would bring that up because you know that President Trump has found a new doctor, a new Tony Fauci.
Mm-hmm.
And this doctor, whose name is Dr. Scott Atlas, and he is a former chief of neuroradiology at Stanford, so he knows his stuff. And although he really has no expertise in public health or infectious diseases, but apparently he goes along with the Trump philosophy. Here is what he had to say. He has called it a good thing for younger, healthy people to be exposed to the virus while claiming children are at near zero risk. Atlas has called on the nation to get a grip. He says, quoting, "There's nothing wrong with having low-risk people get infected as long as the vulnerable are protected. Doesn't matter if younger, healthy people get infected." I'm quoting again. "I don't know how often that has to be said. They have nearly zero risk of a problem from this. When younger, healthier people get infected, that's a good thing," he went on to say, because that's exactly the way the population immunity will develop, herd immunity.
We're supposed to treat this like the chicken pox, and when somebody in the class gets it, just let them mingle with everybody that way. Everybody gets it out of the way at the same time. That makes zero sense to me. And how are we going to control where these young people go throughout their day and going back to their families and stuff? I mean, that sounds ridiculous just to say that a certain selection of the community should go ahead and just get this virus that has caused the global pandemic. And, we're going to trust them to stay away from the elderly and people that are at high risk of fatality from getting this is just ridiculous. I wouldn't trust an 18-year-old as far as I could throw him.
I am telling you, I am in total agreement with you, and yet this is the new pick by the president to replace Anthony Fauci. He is now on the coronavirus task force, and this is the attitude that he wants. And we know the president wants to press forward for sure with playing football and because young people are at such low risk of getting it, or at least of dying from it. Now, does that take into account the heart issues that you get? Now, you read different numbers on that. Some would say only 5% of those that get COVID, which is a low percent of the population anyway, would get the enlargement of the heart tissue. And that can lead to permanent damage, but there's only 5% would get myocarditis,
I think is how you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only 5% would get, and then only a fraction of those would end up with permanent damage. But I certainly wouldn't want my son to be the one that would get that, or my daughter, or even the neighbor across the street that's got a young person that you think is risk-free. It's not risk-free. There are certain risks that are certainly still involved in all of this. But that is exactly what Dr. Scott Atlas, I quoted him exactly, and he is now on the coronavirus task force.
As someone who does have an underlying heart condition, it does scare me a little bit now knowing that COVID-19 can lead to that. And, I also know that myocarditis can also be caused by other viral diseases that we've known about for a long time, including, the seasonal flu. There have been cases of people getting myocarditis from that. And it's a little bit worrisome, but like you said, 5% kind of makes me raise an eyebrow at it, but not too worried about it. But still, with all the different factors that are going into what we need to do to stop the spread of this, to ultimately get a grip on it, it's hard to really build a 100% opinion when I still don't know the facts, and I still don't think that many people know the facts. So anybody that's out there, regardless of how great of a pedigree they have as a doctor and in the medical field, for somebody to blatantly say, just as young people go ahead and get it, it's not going to affect you long term, is ridiculous, because nobody knows. It's a basic guess.
And we are guessing a little bit. I am a little surprised that we are scheduled for a lot of high school football this weekend, including two big games in this area. Briarcrest will be at Collierville, and Christian Brothers will be at Houston. Those are four big schools playing each other in high school football when we are really not 100% certain. They are the test cases. If that works here, then there's not going to be, you would think, issues. But I guess, we'll see. And the other aspect of this is, in the past, and it depends on how quickly this new saliva test, and I'll talk a little, there's a new saliva test that could be a game changer. It is totally affordable, where even high schools, I think, could afford testing on a fairly regular basis. The turnaround, I think, is about 24 hours on the tests. So, but how quickly all of these can be mass-produced would be a big question, which gets us to top and not.
Top story of the day.
Now, I will begin with the bubbles have worked. There is no question about it. Right now in overtime, the Nuggets are pulling away from the Jazz. 23 and a half seconds left in game one of a quad header on ESPN. It is 133-122. The Nuggets are going to escape. Of course, they are the higher seed, and I should point out we will be making a little bit later in this program our NBA playoff picks, mine, Drew's, and I'm assuming you did get Brett.
Yes, I have Brett's picks.
Okay, so we will have that coming your way a little bit later in the program. But there's no doubt with the NHL and with the NBA, the bubbles have worked. There's no COVID shutdowns whatsoever, which makes me wonder if baseball continues to go. And I don't know if you saw this, but the Cardinals now will play 53 games starting Sunday. 53 games, 44 days, 11 doubleheaders. In order to get to the 58 mark, they'll still be 2 games shy.
That's a lot of baseball.
Will they make it? Will they still be alive after playing that much baseball? But the thing that I wonder about is once you get to the playoffs, would you then just say, "Look, we got here. Let's get these playoffs in a bubble, and test these guys, and if they're good, get them in the bubble. We know they're good right there, and restrict them there so that the best teams have their best players for the elimination games."
Yeah, I think the bubble system works, and I think that the proposal cities out there will probably work. Obviously you go with the cities that have 2 major league teams, New York, Chicago, and LA for West, Central, and East, and just the fact that every bubble thus far has worked from NBA, MSL, and NHL, it's a no-brainer. You got to go to the bubble just for more of a peace of mind, I think, for the players and fans that it's going to happen.
Your top story?
My top story of the day, the NBA playoffs in the bubble down in Orlando are officially underway as we have games all day. As Dave just said, Denver pulling away in overtime against Utah to win Game 1. About to tip off first-round action, Nets versus Raptors at 5:30. We'll have Sixers versus Celtics. Nightcap, Dallas versus the Clippers. Going to be a great day of basketball.
No doubt about it.
Not top story of the day.
Well, actually, it's not as bad as you might think. We have some decent news, I think, when it comes to the coronavirus and the dashboard in Shelby County today. 229 new cases. We've passed 25,000 now at 25,275. 4 new deaths, so we're 328. But here's the good news. That is way down from the average of each week. And that is coming down now since we really spiked near June. So you're seeing that come down a little bit. You're seeing 2,200 tests yesterday, which is a pretty good amount of tests. And the positivity rate was 10.4. That's coming way down. The other nice thing is hospital bed availability. Now we're at 87% capacity. That's down from 92 later in the past week. So all these are really good indicators. As far as the United States now, 5.5 million cases. 173,000 have passed away. We've had almost 3 million recover. In Tennessee, 133,000 cases, 1,300 deaths. Mississippi, 72,000 cases, 2,100 deaths. And in Arkansas, 53,000 cases, 600 deaths. In the long big picture here, a new saliva test that was created by, I think it was Yale, the doctors at Yale. And they are giving away their research to every pharmaceutical firm that wants it. There is no cost. They've gotten it, they've proved it, and they will let all these other people mass produce it. So how quickly this test, and the FDA has said it could be used, how quickly this test now gets into mass distribution to be allowed for everybody, and it's really cheap from what I understand, very affordable. Everybody can pay for this. We may see where high schools, which you didn't think could test, now can test. And this would go a long way at figuring out how we can really and truly isolate people that have it, and those that don't can go on and live their normal lives. This, as the doctor on NBC says, this is a game changer. Your not top story?
My not top story of the day, Dallas Cowboys defensive tackle and 6-time Pro Bowler Jannard McCoy ruptured his right quadric tendon during the first practice of training camp today and will undergo season-ending surgery. Hate to see it happen to such a talented young man. It was at least does have guaranteed $18 million in the bank from his latest contract. But he was going to be something special. I thought he was going to be something special, and so did the entire Dallas Cowboys coaching staff this year for Dallas.
I am really shocked at your top story of the day. I mean, I'm just totally shocked because I would have thought for sure your top story would be the Baltimore Ravens are expected to host former Dallas Cowboys star wide receiver Des Bryant
I don't
for
want to get ahead of
workouts.
myself. I mean, I'm still kind of on the fence of how I feel about it. I don't know how much Des Bryant has in the tank.
He's only 31.
I know that,
He's
but
staying
that's
in
the
good
thing.
shape.
It feels he's only 31, but it feels like he's so much older than that. For some reason, to me, I guess it's the injuries and everything else that's gone on in his career for Des Bryant, that he just feels older to me. And if it works out and we sign him, welcome to the flock. But I'm just not 100% sold on him.
And those are your top and your not top stories on the day. We do have a busy show. Ted Butler will be joining us here in just a couple of minutes. I just can't get over Ted. I love the man.
I knew this was coming.
How many? Okay, so he has picked for me 3 times now.
Yes.
3 weeks, right? 3 times. He made me 0 money last week. What do you think in those 3 weeks he has brought forth for me?
I'm not sure about money, but I think out of 6 picks, he's only had 2 made cuts.
I think that's about right. Maybe he's brought in $30,000, $50,000.
If that.
I'm just beside myself. But he knows golf. I don't understand it. He'll join us at 3:30. We got medals coming your way at 3:45 from CBSSportsline.com. Our friend David Cobb will join us at 4. At 4:30 to Chicago, we will go to talk baseball and hockey and NBA with our friend George Offman. And then we'll make some NBA picks. We've got Anthony Sane coming your way to talk some Grizz. Then we've got even more Grizz because the voice of the Grizzlies on TV, Pete Pranica, will join us at 5:30. At 5:50, it will be crunch time. So we are very, very busy for sure today. Looking forward to chatting with all these guests and sharing it with you. Don't forget our text line, the First Bank text line, still wide open, always wide open for all of you to communicate with us. We are officially underway on this Monday on Sports Time.
Search Sports 56 on Facebook and give This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Lexus of Memphis. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brett Norsworthy.
Welcome back into the Family Leisure Studio. We are underway on this Monday. We've got one NBA game in the books, and the Denver Nuggets taken to overtime by the Utah Jazz, playing without Mike Conley, who had a little baby boy. Yet they hung in. Donovan Mitchell was outstanding. He had 49 in regulation. I wasn't sure if he scored much in the overtime. But Nuggets are able to get past that very first game, and so we have one in the books. That's the first game of 4. Over the weekend, we completed the regular season. The playoffs will start in Boston next week, and then, of course, we still got 2 majors to play. So we shall be busy when it comes to golf, and Ted Butler always there to chat with us. He's the best at chatting about golf. He is not very good at picking golf. Can I just give you some numbers, Ted? This is just really, really incredible. Drew this week, $326,000 at the Wyndham. That's what he earned. John Goen had a bad week, $57,816. Brett actually won the week. The worst guy in the whole group here. He made $624,800. I, for a third time, I guess, I should know better. I, for a third time, pick you to pick for me. You know what you brought in? 0. Nothing. Nada. Bagel. Goose egg. What?
I think it's from all the snake bites on my feet from living in Brownsville. That's got to be it. I mean, how could you not pick Justin Rose over Jim Herman?
Jim Herman. What is that? Not?
I mean, tell me who picked Jim Herman?
Nobody. But let me ask you this. Seriously, if I had said to you before this tournament began, or you, Drew, how many tournaments has Jim Herman won? What would you have said to me?
I for sure would have had to Google it and just double-check that Jim Herman was a player on the PGA Tour.
That's honesty. What about you, Ted?
I would have guessed 1.
I'm not sure I would have even guessed 1. The fact that he won 3 times now tells you the man has no consistency whatsoever. You realize he went from 192 in the world to 52 with that win. He keeps winning enough to stay on tour. He was worried, he said, going into this thing after last week's showing at the PGA in his first couple of holes of the Wyndham, that he might not make the Corn Ferry Tour.
Well, last year at this time, he was thinking about giving up golf. I mean, he hit pretty much rock bottom. So he was not on my picking list, obviously.
That just shows you how tough it is to make it on the PGA Tour. Here's a guy we don't even know who's now won for the 3rd time, and he's been on the tour for a while.
Yeah. I've heard his name before. I knew he'd won something, but it'd been quite a while ago. And, he deserved it. He shot 7 under the last round. That's, he went out and won it. I thought Kim was going to do it, and I thought Horschel was going to do it. I actually thought about picking Horschel before Justin Rose, but I thought, he's not playing that good. That's great.
Well, you should have ultimately picked him, and then you wouldn't have been yelled at by Dave to start. I knew it was coming, Ted. And I just want to apologize for everybody else in the picking contest that we do not approve of Dave's behavior towards you as a guest picker. So I do want to first and foremost apologize.
Well, I appreciate that, but I knew on the front end it was a no-win situation. I knew that. Three down with 2 to go.
Had you picked winners, I would have given you all the credit in the world, like I do with your wonderful teaching.
I'm sure.
But 0? You've picked 3 times, and I think you've made 2 cuts. 6 guys.
Yeah, but think of the guys I picked though: Justin Thomas, Justin Rose. I mean, these guys can play. It's not like they were, guys from the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, that's very true, Ted. You do make pretty smart picks on paper. They just haven't been able to turn out into any wins or money for Dave when you've been guest picking. But a lot of low scores this weekend at the Wyndham Championship. What was so great about the course that players were able to have birdies galore? And I mean, even Siwoo Kim got an ace this weekend.
Well, the conditions again. They've had a lot of turns this year with very little wind, and the greens were soft, so they can fire at everything, and the fairways are holding tee shots. It's just it's a good setup for pros. They need the times they don't shoot low is when they've got deep rough and hard fairways and fast greens. Something like Firestone.
The thing that really won it for Jim Herman this week is putting. He had 445 feet of putts made. This is the newest, by the way, of all the statistics that we're going to get. This is the newest thing where we count feet of putts made, which means, if you make a lot of long putts, you're probably going to make some birdies and win some tournaments. And if you're making a bunch of 2-footers over 18 holes, that's 36 feet of putt. So it's not very good. Do you like this new statistic that we're getting a lot of?
Well, it's somewhat interesting, but if you got a guy that's hitting the ball really well, hitting it 10 or 12 feet every hole, he's not going to have a very high putting statistic. It's the guys that are just barely getting on the green, making lots of 30-footers like Spieth used to do. I'd like to have some stats on what his were when he was putting so great. But I don't. I think it's great he did, but I'm not all impressed with it.
Since you bring up Spieth, what do you think his problems are? He has gone from an elite player to just a decent player.
Well, when he was winning, he made every 30-footer he looked at, and missing a putt inside 10 feet never happened. Because even sometimes when he won, he hit some terrible golf shots. His swing has been an issue for a while, and he knows it. I mean, he's working on things. He's talked to Jack Nicklaus about it. He's got that little bowed left elbow through impact. Gets a little cupped, and it looks like it ought to be a fade, and ends up being a pull. And he's working on it. I know he's working hard at it, but it just hasn't showed up yet.
Yeah, hopefully Jordan is just one of those players that you thought when he busted on the scene was going to be just this phenomenal guy. Started to hear the Tiger comparison and just hasn't been the same since. But while I personally would love to sit here and talk to you about Siwoo Kim, I'll for the next 10, 15 minutes. I think most of our listeners want to go ahead and get to the playoff and how the big boys are going to play this coming week. Obviously Brooks Koepka and DJ are two of the biggest guys on tour now. Out of those two, who do you think's got the best chance in the playoff?
I think I can't tell whether Koepka is really injured or not. I think I'd probably take DJ right now, because that last turn when he was laying on the ground there, rubbing his knees and his back and everything, it's got to be something that he's not totally comfortable with. And it seems like DJ ought to be getting a little bit annoyed, getting close and not doing anything. And he comes up pretty good for when he gets in the mood. You always tell by his fist pumps.
I'm with you. I think DJ has the better chance of making a move here late, because DJ, I think, is healthy. He's won once this year. DJ was in the final group, if I recall, of the PGA, and then did not play very well. But he had positioned himself with the ability of 3 really good rounds to win the tournament. There is definitely something wrong with Brooks Koepka, although you couldn't really tell it here unless you want to count the last hole, because we thought for sure that he would probably get into a playoff or something at the WGC here, but he hit the ball in the water, and that allowed Justin Thomas to walk away with it. But he clearly was not right at the PGA. I know he had a couple of good rounds there, but every time you looked, there was a camera shot of him on the ground getting stretched out. There was an issue with a hip or a knee or both.
Yeah, something like that. And the guys that are the modern pros that work out like these guys do are prone to getting hurt. I teach a couple of guys that are in the physical fitness business and actually work with players, and some of the stuff they do it's hard on your body. They're doing reps, and DJ and Kepka are competitors at everything. So they're working themselves to death, and then you look at DeChambeau, and it's just the way things seem to be going. But a lot of them that are doing that are getting hurt.
Well, this is not working out for DeChambeau. I mean, he hits the ball 400 yards, literally, but he can't hit a wedge. And I've heard Nick Price say on a couple of occasions now, because he plays everything at the length of a sixth iron, that the one thing he should change is that he needs to shorten the wedge. That is what is hurting him. What is your sense of all that? You are a swing guru. You have, just so people realize, Ted teaches and has for over 40 years. Is it 40 or 50 years?
51.
51 years at summer golfing games. Used to be the old putt-putt. And you got to call early because it's hard to get a spot with him. He's busy as could be. But he knows every golf swing going back to certainly Nicklaus and Weiskopf and Player and those and that era
absolutely.
Of golfers. So what do you think is the issue with DeChambeau? You know he can hit the ball 1.5 miles, and I think he's a fair enough putter, even though it's a weird way that he putts. But he can't. His short game is killing him. He's got wedges into every green, and he still can't get it close.
Well, he's trying to take every aspect of the game to what he thinks the level should be, and I agree with you on this. I think wedges shouldn't be as long as a 6-iron. I mean, it's got to be. They got to be heavy. I don't know how good your touch can be with, big old long heavy wedges. I'd hate to do that, but he's doing everything, and health-wise and exercise and hitting golf balls and going into compression chambers and he studies everything, taking everything to the limit, and he may not be right on this one, but I think he'll figure it out. Though I just don't know how long he can last swinging as hard as he does. It's got to break your body down.
Yeah, you would think that eventually it's going to come back to bite him and maybe even shorten his career a bit. But speaking of wedges, and more particularly places on the course that you might use them, I do want to get your thoughts and opinion on what happened at the U.S. Amateur, I believe last Friday, with the caddy costing his player the match by touching the sand. To most people in golf, that's a very simple rule. Most people understand and know that when you're in the bunker, you're not supposed to really touch the sand or really touch anything. Why do you think that? Was it a mental blunder? Or do you think the caddy just didn't know?
No, yeah, it had to be a mental blunder. If he was any kind of caddy at all, I mean, that he just had to have been thinking about something or else. I didn't see it. I don't know what exactly how he did it. But in tournaments like that, caddies surely know that it had to be some sort of mistake or not cheating or anything. I'm sure, but it's a blunder.
Yeah, well,
did he do it? Or how did he touch the sand?
Well, he actually went about 2 feet into the sand and used 2 fingers to sort of feel the sand and its depth and how much sand was in there. And then he walked out, and this thing's on TV. Everybody in the world saw it after that, and they reported it. And it cost that kid the hole, which was near the end of the match. I think were tied.
I think it was 18.
It might have been 18, and
wow.
he lost that hole. And therefore, this was the knockout round, so he was knocked out of the U.S. Amateur. And I guess a part that exacerbated the problem was initially the guy said, no, I didn't touch the sand. And then they go, we got you on video touching the sand, man. I mean, and then there was nowhere for him to go. So, that was the end of that. All right, we go to Boston. If you were picking – I don't know why I'm asking you.
You'd asking me for.
Yeah, but that's what we do. No, seriously, is Rory going to get his act together here? Who do you like coming into these playoffs? Who's the guy that's hot? Is somebody like DJ who's already won once that seems to still be healthy? Is he a guy that you think could end up winning the FedEx Cup. Justin Thomas, we know, won here, and then he hasn't played as well, but now he's been off for a week or so. He's resting up. Who is the guy? Maybe Billy Horschel's due. There's a guy, man. He's one of those guys that I think works out, but not crazy like DJ and Koepka. Who are the one or two or three guys that you really like in the playoffs?
Well, I really like Justin Thomas. I've liked him all year long. In that last tournament, he was swinging so well. He was so smooth and on plane, and he early in the year, I picked Rory McIlroy that this is his breakout year. That's how good I'm doing. I mean, he can't play a tap, but Justin Thomas for sure would be at the top of the list for me. And Justin Rose has been getting better every week until this week. I kind of like him. Always hope the Tiger will get going. It's probably a little bit early yet, but if I had to go one guy, it'd be Justin Thomas.
What do you think has happened to Rory? We all thought Rory was going to be really and truly one of the greats, and he won all those majors to begin with. And his run was a lot more consistent than, say, Jordan Spieth, who had 18 months of greatness. Rory's had years of greatness, but he should be in his prime right now. What has happened to Rory McIlroy?
Well, he just never has made a lot of putts. I mean, he hits the ball really well. He puts himself in position for birdies and eagles all the time, but he never gets on a run of putting. 10, 12 feet. This is some short putts. He maybe have a little self-doubt. Maybe he's lost a little bit of confidence because it's been several years now since he's putted very well. And to win golf tournaments, you've got to make putts. There's no question about that. I mean, he's a great ball striker. No, I don't think he's choking or anything. He's just hadn't hit the streak yet.
He is. Ted
Maybe won't this year.
Well, maybe not. Here's the unfortunate thing for Rory, honestly. When the pandemic hit, he was on a roll. He looked like he was going to be really good. The pandemic really stopped his momentum, and he's never, ever gotten it back. Maybe it will for the playoffs, but I have my suspicions.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that how much having no crowds out there would affect them. They've got the really good players that get the roars and stuff, and they're playing without that. That having never been in that position, I don't know, but they might have an effect on the really good guys.
Well, I can tell you this: if it's not going to be the crowd that is for you, and we didn't get a chance to talk last week, but if DJ or if Rory or if Tiger or if there is anybody who is a well-established star is on the top of the leaderboard in a major like they were at Harding Park down the stretch, and that crowd gets into it, that would be intimidating to a Colin Morikawa. When all there is silence, and it's like it was when you were in college, I think it's a lot easier.
I agree with you, 100%. 100%. I read something in Golf Digest about James Worthy, who's really gotten into golf now, and he said, I'm out there and I'm playing. Everybody's whispering and talking real quiet and everything. I'm used to playing basketball and the opponent's yelling, "You suck."
Yeah.
he said, I love that. That motivated me. The hour's got to have some effect on it.
I agree with that. I especially think it gives those that are underdogs a better chance than they would, because they would be intimidated by the crowd cheering for the established player.
And Tiger and the other guys get jacked up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ted, thank you much. We'll do this again next week. You do not have to pick for me, so I will not pick on you next week.
That's okay. I can take it.
I know you can.
I know about golf.
Thank you, Ted. We appreciate it.
Okay.
That is our man. That is Ted Butler. We've got to take a quick time out. I'll let you know we're sitting in the Family Leisure Studios. You know by now, you got to get to the real place. I-40 Whidden Road, just north, on the right, where you can still save money on the 2021 swimming pool. I think they're out of the 2020s, but you can be first in line for installation and everything, and you'll get the 2020 pricing on the brand new technology that will come out next year. And again, you're the first in line to get the darn thing installed because they go crazy once spring hits. Patio furniture, I just had some put in, and man, I was so pleased because there's 20 to 30% off on those items, and they only have the best state of the art. Play gyms, they were out. Now they're back in stock, at least right now. And you can beat the heat with an indoor game. You can get a slate pool table. You can get a ping pong table. You can get an air hockey table. They've got great prices on those. And as our swimming season comes to an end, pool toys and floats, they're up to 30% off. Go see my friends at Family Leisure. You will thank me later. We take a quick timeout. When we come back, we've got precious metals from the weekend coming your way on Sports Time.
Spend your lunch with great. Now, back to Sports Time on Sports 56 with Wolo and Stack. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Lexus of Memphis. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brett Norsworthy.
Somewhere, somehow, somebody must have kicked you around some.
Cruising through our Monday first hour. We already have one in the books. Boy, Donovan Mitchell, 57 points in a loss in overtime. Denver outlasts Utah 135 to 125. Toronto really putting it to Brooklyn early. 4 minutes gone second quarter, but 54-28. The Raptors, the defending champions, over the Brooklyn Nets. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for Precious Medals. I'll start with a bronze medal to the Chicago White Sox. I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but they had back-to-back home runs.
Oh, I saw.
4 straight jacks out of the ballpark. I'm not sure when the last time that happened.
I'm not sure when was the last time it happened. I'll actually give a note for my rust on that. The pitcher, he's the first Major League pitcher in MLB history on his debut to give up back-to-back home runs.
That is infamy, is it not?
It is.
Oh, that is really terrible. I am going to give a silver medal to Jim Herman, his 3rd PGA tournament title, and Drew, both you and I really didn't know much about him.
Not a clue.
That is the honest-to-goodness truth. 3 titles already, 445 feet of putts made, and he goes from 192 to 52 in the FedEx Cup rankings. Phoenix Suns, 8-0 in the bubble and get nothing. Nothing! And you know what? Portland is just a team of destiny, aren't they? I mean,
they really are.
I'm not picking him to win the first round. We're going to do NBA picks later, but I should, because my goodness, they shouldn't have beaten the team. I forget who they – Brooklyn. They shouldn't have beaten Brooklyn.
If Brooklyn would have taken a timeout when they had one with 21 seconds left to go, they might have lost that game.
If Brooklyn wins that game, the Grizzlies are the 8th seed.
Mm-hmm. And we're playing them yesterday.
And we're playing even if we lost yesterday, which we wouldn't have, we would have played Phoenix. Unbelievable. But they were really good, 8-0, and now everybody's going, we talked about Memphis being a great young team and New Orleans being a great young team. Wait a second. This team with Devin Booker, they're pretty good. There's a lot of good teams in the West, so they get my silver. And my gold medal goes to John Morant. You realize that John Morant got a triple-double, 35 points in that game against Portland, trying to will his team to victory, and he did it, we find out later, with a broken thumb. This guy clearly has the ability, provided injury doesn't take anything away, because his game is absolutely based on explosion. He is as fast as anybody I've seen and a quick jumper. He has got to stay healthy, but he's going to be the greatest Grizzly of all time if he does. John Morant gets a gold. Your medals?
My bronze, going to give a bronze to my boy Siwoo Kim for the top 3 finish over the weekend. Of course, you definitely get a medal when you hit an ace there on Saturday. I gave a silver to John Morant.
Terrible final round, though.
Yeah, finished even. It was pretty bad after you go 65, 65, 62, and then shoot a 70. But silver medal goes to John Morant and the Grizzlies for performance on Saturday. Everybody, even though they lost, was the most complete game by the Grizzlies that I have seen in probably since before the bubble, for sure. Probably have to go back to February for that game. I mean, Giannis had 22, Dylan Brooks had 20, so did Brandon Clark, and the Grizzlies shot 56% from beyond the arc. I mean, just an incredible performance. Wish they would have gotten the W. And I'm going to give a gold to Jim Herman for winning the Wyndham Championship over the weekend, shooting a 61 on Saturday and a 63 on Sunday. Moved up 227 spots in the World Golf ranking. And I also give a side gold to Donovan Mitchell today. I mean, anytime you have 57 points in an overtime loss is still amazing.
That really is incredible. Those are your medals, gold, silver, bronze. We'll do Russ a little bit later in the program. This portion of the show brought to you by The Butcher Shop, and I want to remind everybody you can go in for service at The Butcher Shop, or you can pick up curbside. They will be happy to do that, but they want me to let everybody know. They have private group rooms that are huge. Many people don't realize that their party rooms are large enough for tables with 6 feet spacing between the tables. They can have large groups, too, 20 to 40, and still meet all of the guidelines. So if you want to go in and feel really good about the spacing, trust me, it is cavernous in there. It is safe. And if that's not your deal and you want to go outside with curbside, they're happy to do that as well. They also use Benabox. All you got to do is go to thebutchershop.com. Either way, inside or out, there's no beating the Butcher Shop for those steaks and the salads and the fresh bread and Fresh Burger Friday every Friday, and you can do that curbside now as well. The Butcher Shop, it keeps on humming. There's an hour in the books. When we come back, we will have a lot of good conversation with David Cobb, college football and college basketball. That is next on Sports Time.
WIVG-FM Tunica, Memphis, and WPG-FLP Memphis, Flynn Broadcasting Stations. Now, more of Sports Time on Sports 56 with Wolo and Stats. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Homer Skelton Hyundai. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brett Norsworthy.
Welcome in on this marvelous Monday. Wallow and Drew with you. Stats has the next couple of weeks off, a well-deserved rest for Mr. Norsworthy. In the meantime, this is a day where the NBA is incredibly busy. So is the NHL, actually. They both have quadruple doubleheaders that you can watch on television if you like. There is baseball. And we hope there is football, college football. That's one of the things we want to chat with our friend David Cobb, who writes for CBSSportsline.com. But I'm going to start with college basketball because you just wrote the story that I just saw posted that the NCAA is going to try to decide by mid-September about college basketball. What do you think the odds are that by mid-September they'll have the decision and that we would actually start this thing in November, David Cobb?
Hey, I'm not real optimistic about them starting it on time, but I am encouraged by the fact that there's actually a face and a voice behind the NCAA's leadership on college basketball. It's Dan Gavitt. He's the vice president of the NCAA. He's in charge of basketball. And the fact that he's actually going out there and putting his name on a statement that's providing some guidance and some leadership and some clarity on this is an encouraging sign, in my opinion. The fact is, though, that the Pac-12 has already said they won't play until the calendar flips to 2021 at the earliest, and the Ivy League is there with them. So, I mean, some of these preseason tournaments have already been disrupted in terms of what those schedules were supposed to look like by those decisions. So I would tend to expect that barring some sort of breakthrough in terms of, the availability of this new saliva testing or something big in that regard, we're probably looking at a delayed start to college basketball. But I do think they are determined to stage an NCAA tournament this year. And so I'm relatively optimistic that college basketball isn't going to take the crazy, disorganized, just chaos route that college football has taken.
We discussed a little bit earlier the saliva test, which, in the words of the doctor on NBC, could be a game changer. But like you just said, hey, we had Penny Hardaway on this show say he thought, just gut feel, that they would maybe start in January, and that came, I think, even before the announcement by the Pac-12 they were not going to start until
I believe
January 1st.
We had Penny on about a week or two before that.
So he had great insight already, and I don't know if the saliva test will change any thinking in that regard. We are seeing, at least in Shelby County, the numbers starting to go down and to become a bit more stable. My question for you is this: if it's January 1st, how many games do you think you can really play before the NCAA tournament? You're not going to back up the NCAA tournament, I don't think.
No, I mean, you'd be looking at a conference-only deal if you start in January. I mean, maybe you could still do the SEC Big 12 Challenge and some of those random one-offs that are a part of the schedule come the new year. But, I mean, you'd be looking at conference-only and maybe even an abbreviated conference schedule for some of these leagues that have gone to a 20-game schedule. The Pac-12 this year, they were supposed to transition from playing 18 conference games to playing 20. And by doing that, they were going to have to move up the beginning of their conference play into December and do sort of like what the Big Ten has done, where each team plays a couple of conference games in December and then it really kicks up in January. Well, unless they want to push the NCAA tournament back or try to cram a couple of extra conference games into the new year, I mean, you're looking at, an 18-game conference-only sort of deal there. I mean, I think everything's still on the table. Nothing's been decided by any stretch. But to me, that would almost be a favorable outcome if you could stage a full conference slate for each team. To me, that would be a better alternative than trying to do pods, with certain teams in your region, and then trying to make sense of a deal where you played the same handful of teams multiple times, but you don't really have a big sample size. There's some kind of wonky alternatives that have been floated out there, but to me, the one that makes the most sense is a conference-only schedule that starts in January and more or less resembles what your conference schedule would normally be.
Yeah, Cobb, and I think you're exactly right. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But with the NCAA tournament, set to be in March of 2021, when the selection committee comes together, we hear a lot about non-conference schedules, strength of schedule, wins against top 25 programs, quad 1, quad 2, whatever you want to call them. How big of a disadvantage is it for a school like the University of Memphis, who while the American's a decent basketball conference, it's not the greatest, and that could ultimately keep them in or out or completely ruin seeding by only playing conference and not getting the non-conference games that they had slated on the schedule.
I mean, they're just going to have to totally throw out a lot of the criteria that they use in a normal year to evaluate seeding. I mean, it's unfortunate, and I can already see the cries of injustice, now coming in a few months.
We get it in a normal year, let alone during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe they predetermined, how many teams from each conference are going to be getting bids, because think about like the Big Ten. I think Minnesota went 9-11 in the Big Ten last season, but they were only like 16-15 overall, and they had some bad losses in the non-conference that I think were going to put them on the wrong side of the bubble. But if you just looked at 9-11 in the Big Ten, as competitive as it was, they had a case based off of that to say why they should have been in. Mm-hmm. And so if you're gonna go that route and say, well, we didn't have any bad losses, you could be looking at a conference like the Big Ten making a case for getting 12 teams in, and then you could have a league like the AAC that doesn't have the opportunity to prove itself out of conference, and nobody really believes that hypothetically, let's say a 12-6 league record. Maybe a team who posts that record, maybe a Memphis team that posts that record, believes they should be in, but they're not getting the respect nationally because nobody feels like they've proven it against anyone. Mm-hmm. So it could get really murky. That could be a real issue. So maybe for that reason they try to stage a few non-conference games, but I mean, they just need to focus on, I think, baby steps, and that's going to be, preserving a conference season and hopefully having conference tournaments, which, obviously, I think that automatic qualifier would still be like normal, and that would at least give anyone who is in their conference tournament a chance to make the NCAA tournament, regardless of however convoluted the regular season is. I think that should be a priority as well, is preserving those conference tournaments, because then, at least everybody has some pathway to try and get into the postseason.
If you're a good team and there's another really good team in your conference, at least both of you get in that way, most likely. The winner would get in, and the ranked team, let's just say. So the American would at least get two in a scenario like that. I guess we're writing off no chance for the Tigers to play in the Bahamas, where they aren't even letting any foreign countries in at the moment. So I don't see how you play that in 2 months.
Yeah, I would say
3 months. I'm sorry, 3 months. I don't know about Hawaii or Maui, which we all love, but Maui right now you're quarantined for 2 weeks still, aren't you? If you go, you can't leave being isolated for 14 days and then they let you out. I mean, you're not doing that. So I'm assuming now all these November holiday basketball tournaments are probably out the window, especially if we're not going to have 100% capacity or even 50% capacity in some instances.
Yeah, in all likelihood, I would say that's the case. I mean, maybe you could – the more practical thing to do rather than going to Hawaii or the Bahamas or whatever far-flung locale one of those things are hosted in would be to decide on a host campus and set up a little bubble there where everybody gets tested upon entering, and then you essentially are in your hotel and you're in the arena. I think that would maybe be the more practical alternative, and maybe you can still keep or renegotiate a lot of those sponsorships and the advertising. Because, I mean, if you think about it, the Bahamas deal, the Maui Invitational, the revenue for those things are not attendance-based necessarily. I mean, they play that, the Maui Invitational in the Chaminade gym, right? So, I mean, I'm sure the donors pay a nice amount, to go and see those games, but I don't think the lion's share of the revenue for those events comes from ticket sales. So, I mean, maybe you can move them onto campus and do it that way and still, preserve the advertising dollars. Maybe there's a way to do it. I just don't think that it's going to be in the Bahamas or Maui or wherever. I think you can safely go ahead and cross those potential trips off your calendar, or at least pocket the money you were going to spend on that this year for a future season.
Yeah, and speaking of tickets, David, I want to know, have you heard anything about the idea of fans at college basketball? I mean, in college football right now, a lot of schools are announcing 25%. Some schools are saying nobody's allowed. I still don't think we've got an exact number here for the University of Memphis. Have you heard any talk about allowing fans in an arena?
Well, I don't expect there to be an edict from the NCAA or even individual conferences on that. I think it's another one where it's going to be state by state and maybe even city by city or campus by campus. And right now, I mean, barring some sort of dramatic shift in a positive direction, I'd be really surprised if a lot of schools are having anybody in the gym aside from essential personnel, to be honest. I mean, maybe you negotiate something where a few of the high dollar donors can get in a socially distanced manner, but I just think that that's so far down the priority list right now. I mean, these university presidents surely have learned from what they've seen with college football, and they've got to put the first things first, which is just having the games and protecting the safety of the student athletes, and certainly having fans in the gym doesn't help with that. And so, I mean, it's unfortunate, but basketball especially, I think you can get by without it because, one, you can move the games to a smaller venue. I mean, you don't have to play in your gargantuan gym. You can set it up in a practice gym in a more sanitized environment. And then, two, I mean, yeah, the pageantry of college basketball is something we love, but it's not nearly as essential to the entire experience as it is with college football. So, with basketball, I think you can more easily get away with it. And so for that reason, I would not expect fans to be a priority, and I would expect very few, if any, programs to really try to push the envelope there. I mean, you think about it like this too. I mean, there might be some teams that say, well, we're not going to come and play you if you're going to have 5,000 people in the gym. We feel that that's a risk to our program. I think there's kind of going to be an agreement among a lot of programs that we're going to put fans sort of behind the overall emphasis of pulling this season off. And then, hey, you know what? Maybe by February we're in a different position and it's a different conversation, and you can start to talk about having people back in the gym. But where things are right now, the way things are shaping up and where they're headed, I'm not sensing a lot of urgency or emphasis from leaders in the sport about putting fans in the seats this year.
Well, a few thoughts on that. It really gets tricky if you have fans in. If you follow the guidelines of Shelby County, and I'm speaking specifically about the University of Memphis now, I think you could get into FedEx Forum about 1,200 if they space at that 12 feet distancing, about 1,200. The players, they get about 50 or 100 of those tickets. Now you're down to 1,100 tickets, let's just say. So you're talking about a guy who usually sits middle section on the circle, the jump circle, and maybe he's 10 rows up. Now that guy 10 rows up, he's up in the rafters, and he's paid a seat license. It's a donation, right? He's paid a bunch of money to sit where he sits, and now he's not sitting anywhere near there. And so I'm not sure that you would like that dilemma, because you're going to end up making more people mad than you are.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make them happy. So what you might do is your best donors, you shift them around, and instead of paying the money for rent at FedEx Forum, why don't you go to the building you own? Why don't you play it at the El Marone Fieldhouse?
Agreed.
And it doesn't. So you're only going to have say 300 people that you could space out there, but you let your donors and you rotate games and you let them go in, and you're going to end up losing money unless, as you just said, in February, all of that changes because the load comes down. We've got the saliva testing. Everybody feels better. Heck, by February, we might have some the beginning of mass distribution of vaccines. So that could come into effect. Here's my question for you, and it goes back to the David Gavitt statement, who said they are developing and studying contingency plans for alternatives to the scheduled November 10th start date. Tigers are at this moment, and I know this for a fact because I'm going to start getting prepared. They're playing Arkansas State in football at the Liberty Bowl on September the 5th. If Memphis and the American Athletic Conference are able to start playing football without spikes and they get this season in, if let's just say the SEC, which is starting September the 26th, if they play that opening weekend and then the next week and the week after without significant outbreaks, do you think there's a chance that November 10th start date actually occurs?
Yeah, but I'm a little worried about how the Pac-12 jumped the gun. I mean, I think, one, I know that there were some coaches in the league that knew it was a possibility, but were surprised by the timing of it. And so, I would think it might have been more prudent for them to wait and see exactly what you're saying, how the first few weeks of football go. They chose not to, though. And so they sort of put the rest of college basketball in a tough situation. I mean, Pac-12 has 4 teams in the preseason top 25 and 3 or 4 more that are not too far outside of it. I mean, they're an improved league. They're one of the most prominent leagues in the country. And they've already said that they're not playing until January. And so how do you then make it a level playing field for those who want to play before then? And then how do you then judge the NCAA tournament resume of a team from the Pac-12 that only plays league games versus a team from another league that starts ahead of time?
It muddies the water for sure.
Right. And so I think that's why I'm cautiously optimistic about the NCAA taking an active leadership role today and even behind the scenes in a quieter fashion leading up to today by kind of, I think, getting maybe the Pac-12 being an exception, but for the most part, getting some of the key players on the same page. Because here's the big difference between college football and college basketball. I mean, the NCAA does not govern the FBS football postseason. And so to a certain degree, they had no power over college football and have had little power over college football at any level above FCS. And so the difference is that college basketball's postseason is governed by the NCAA, the NCAA tournament, obviously. So I think that most conferences, I think that every conference that hasn't made a decision yet is going to be in lockstep with the NCAA's guidance from here on out because they want to play in the NCAA tournament, and I don't think they're going to do anything as a league, as a school, et cetera, to jeopardize their chances of meeting whatever criteria they're going to set forth here in a month or two about this season. And so I think the Pac-12 probably jumped the gun. And so, yeah, I guess there is a chance that maybe we get the green light for some of these games to go ahead early on. I would kind of be surprised because even if the FBS conferences that are trying to play football this fall go forward with it, they're not necessarily doing it with the NCAA's blessing. And so they're doing it in an autonomous fashion because every other NCAA fall championship has already been canceled. And so I think that's why I think the likelihood is stronger that college basketball doesn't really begin until January is because this is going to be done with the NCAA's blessing. And I think most of the leagues are going to follow their guidance on this. And so, that's the big difference is that the football that we're still hoping to see this fall is largely falling outside the NCAA's jurisdiction. The basketball will not. And that's going to be a huge factor in why maybe even if football goes ahead decently well over the next couple of months, that college basketball might not exactly follow their path.
I agree with everything that you've just said, including I don't understand why the Pac-12 had to reach out and say January 1st, especially when it was in August, in the middle of August, when they made that decision. Which decision, though, is bigger on the line? Is it that basketball decision or is it football that was made by the Big Ten and by the Pac-12, and they are, let's face it, joined at the hips. It's like 5 mafia families and 2 have a coalition, and the other 3 are sort of another coalition. And if indeed the SEC, the Big 12, I'm going to throw the AAC in there with the SEC, ACC, Big 12, and AAC, if they play successfully, how badly you think the Pac-12 and the Big 10 get burned? But if anything does happen, they're going to go, "We told you."
Yeah, they will. And so I was reading something this morning that was interesting. If the Pac-12 wants to essentially exercise the emergency opt-out that's in its TV contracts, its legal basis for doing so will be much stronger if there aren't other conferences that are successfully playing. It'll be a lot easier for them to argue the case of an emergency for why they can't honor that contract if the other leagues also can't play because of the same emergency. But if you're deciding whether or not the emergency was legitimate, your case is weakened if the other leagues go forward and play when you said you couldn't. So, yes, the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, for that reason, I think are never going to say it, but hoping that the bottom falls out for these other leagues that are moving forward. And then the other concern that I have, this is maybe not primary in the thinking of a lot of people right now, but let's say those 2 leagues do move forward and play in the spring, and they're on their own in that. Well, a lot of these proposals, including the one floated out by Purdue coach Jeff Brom, they would disrupt the beginning and the normalcy of the 2021 season. So are we looking at what these leagues have done, causing a disruption not only to this season but to next, if those leagues can't agree to a plan that allows them to start the next season on time? To me, that's a bigger issue is, okay, let's just, if we have to, agree that 2020 is a crapshoot, and let's put it behind us, and let's make sure all of our ducks in a row are in a row for 2021. You can't let a one-year problem morph into a 2-year problem and morph into a permanent, competitive imbalance over this. We know everybody wants to play football in some form, in this academic year, be that fall or spring. But I would really hate for the Big Ten and the Pac-12 to then try and do something in the spring that jeopardizes what they could do in the fall. And so that's, I think, the next issue that we're probably a month or 2 away from really discussing in earnest. Once we figure out how this fall is going to go, how do we make sure that whatever we do in the spring doesn't disrupt us actually getting back to normal in 2021? Because I think everybody is optimistic that can happen if these leagues finally get on the same page about what they want to do moving forward.
Real quick, last thing from me, David. With the SEC releasing the schedule today, did it raise your confidence level or optimistic level of that we're actually going to play this fall?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they scheduled like zero marquee matchups for week 1. I mean, there's literally nothing that's very interesting in terms of the first week of games. So to me, that was them sort of conceding that we're just going to see how it goes at the beginning. And, if we got to save our best games for last, hopefully we'll have it figured out then. There were some rumors that they were going to play the Iron Bowl week 1. I think it's wise that they're not going to do that because the football is not going to be very pretty week 1 coming out of this. So I think it was the right move to schedule some pretty boring matchups. The whole schedule released tonight, so who knows? I mean, maybe they'll go and put a bunch of marquee games week 2. I don't think that would be smart either, but I thought it was wise that they just sort of had a soft opening, I guess, that they released earlier.
The one common theme there, though, was all the new coaches have tough games to begin with. I mean,
well, it's going to be a tough road, man. I don't envy those guys at all. And Elijah Drinkwitz. Heck, even Lane Kiffin, who's coached in this league before. I mean, they got a pretty favorable draw on the whole, but man, it's going to be brutal for those first year coaches.
He is David Cobb. You read him at CBS. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. And I don't know, maybe it'll be a little bit more clear next week. I doubt it, but we can hope.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Cobb.
Thanks.
That is David Cobb. Brought to you by Homer Skelton Hyundai, Genesis of Olive Branch. In fact, they are our title and our presenting sponsor. And you know one thing that I love about Homer Skelton Hyundai and all those Genesis products, they believe in them. You get a limited lifetime powertrain warranty on every new vehicle on the lot. The 2021 models have started to arrive, and they've done this for the 20s and the 21s. They believe in the product, and they believe in you. They think it's full service at Homer Skelton Hyundai. That's why you get a 3-year, 36,000-mile maintenance package on every new car. That could be a Santa Fe or a Tucson or a Veloster or an Elantra. It could be my G70 or a G80 or the G90 I used to have. And, oh, by the way, the 2021 Genesis SUV is coming in September. If you like safety, because I've talked to you about how great this technology is and how durable it is, well, safety is a big part of it. Hyundai tied for the most number of top safety pick vehicles in 2020, and it only gets better in 2021. Get on Lamar. That's Highway 78 when you get to State Line Road, and then the first exit's Craft Road, turn left, and you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll see the crew that loves taking care of you at Homer Skelton Hyundai and Genesis of Olive Branch. To Chicago we go next to talk a whole bunch of stuff. Baseball and basketball and hockey and football, you name it. With our friend sportscaster George Offman. He is next.
Want to get your voice heard? Now, more of Sports Time on Sports 56 with Wolo and Stats. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Homer Skelton Hyundai. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brad Norsworthy.
Little Chicago. We could say, Drew, that we planned that for George Offman in Chicago.
We could, but it was random.
It was.
They're put in by random.
Yeah, I get it. I was going to try to make him feel good. That's all. Crazy day today. Numbers in Shelby County coming down a little bit, stabilizing when it comes to the coronavirus. The news of the new saliva test, that makes you feel a little bit more positive. I would have to think a lot more affordable. And maybe that'll change the way we think about proceeding with the games. We know the games in the bubble are going on. What a thriller there was in Game 1 of this quad header that they're having on ESPN for the NBA playoffs. Nuggets spoil a 57-point performance by Donovan Mitchell. And the top-rated or the higher-rated seed, the Nuggets, do prevail in overtime by 10, 135-125. The defending champion Toronto Raptors killing the Brooklyn Nets. I have no idea how much Jeremiah Martin is playing in this. He's really – I think he's got himself a chance, though, now to stick on with some team next year. The two-way player for the Nets has really been good in the bubble. 73-51, though. The Raptors just putting it to the Brooklyn Nets. We go to Chicago. Our friend George Offman standing by. Here's a sportscaster who's watched thousands of games over the last 30 years or so on the north side and the south side of Chicago. So let's start with baseball. And both Chicago teams have been affected by the Cardinals' COVID issues. Do you think, George Offman, hello? Do you think baseball will finish the regular season?
Well, the way things are going, the answer would be yes. I mean, they've had bumps in the road, and the Cardinals are the biggest bump. They're playing a doubleheader today at Wrigley Field, and in the second game, they're going to be the home team, which will be the first time some team other than the Cubs were the home team on the north side since 1908. That was
Really?
before Wrigley Field.
The White Sox were never a home team in Wrigley when their ballpark was being built?
No, they played at Comiskey Park until the other ballpark was built because it was built right next door.
That's
so
right.
they went right over. But it's an oddity because originally the Cardinals were supposed to play 7 games at Wrigley. They're going to play all 10, including 4 doubleheaders, and of course the Cardinals started by coming to Chicago and beating the White Sox in 2 7-inning game doubleheaders, a doubleheader the other day. So. It's odd. Take a look at what happened to the Marlins. They were off for 7, 8, 9 days, and they won 6 straight games with a ragtag lineup. So you just don't know. But yeah, I would think that unless we get some significant outbreak with another team, that it will continue. And if you take a look at what happened with the Cleveland Indians now, and you hope that they don't have an outbreak, but there are 2 very, very, very good pitchers on that baseball team who are basically told, go home, you're not playing with us.
Yeah, and speaking of the St. Louis Cardinals and just all those games and the double headers that they have to do, I know it's a 7-inning games doubleheader, but it just seems like way too much baseball. Do you think they end up reaching that 58-game marker, or are they just out of time?
No, they may not only, the weather could play a role in this too, remember.
Yeah.
There's so far the weather in Chicago has been sensational. Here at least, all these games that are being played by the Cardinals here over time, there's barely been any rain in the August. But that's very possible that they wind up not getting to 60, but remember it was in, what year was it? Was it 81, the split season?
Yeah.
When they had the strike? Some teams played 10 games more than others. At the end of the year, there's some teams that played 9 or 10 games more than the others. So, I'm not sure that that's going to be the case here, but I'd really be surprised if the Cardinals are able to play 60 games.
Oh, I don't think they're scheduled to play 60. I think they have to play. Once they came back, if I remember the math correctly, 53 games in 44 days, 11 doubleheaders to get to 58. That's not to get to 60.
Oh, that's to get to 58.
Yeah,
well,
I think that's to get to 58. So they're not going to get there. But they use percentages. That's what they have.
Right. I mean, if you're at 58, I think it's okay. If you only played 50, the percentage I think becomes a little bit skewed because of the fewer games that you've been playing. But I mean, look, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. We're seeing that now. We're seeing it in college sports, which is not going to be played. And I hate to say this to you, Wallo, but I really do not see a college football game or a college basketball game played this year or starting next.
George, I'm not going to totally disagree with you at all, but all I can tell you is this, okay? We can only look at so far what the facts are. The facts are this weekend, this Friday night, in Shelby County, there will be at least two high school football games involving four big schools. Yeah. So they're starting high school football this weekend. I have started to prepare for a game September the 5th at the Liberty Bowl that is still on. I don't know about basketball, and that's inside. That may be different. But I'm just telling you, at this point, I'm a go.
I wish you luck. I mean, you see what happened with North Carolina University today with another outbreak at that university alone. I am hard pressed where some teams are going to play a schedule and a lot of teams aren't. But we'll see. It's fractured. The only leagues that are doing well with this are the leagues that are in the bubble.
Yep.
And that's the hockey, which has been very successful, and the NBA. And I could see where the NBA season and the NHL season, 2021-22, or 2021 rather, are played as long as they play in a bubble.
Well, you know what? Can you afford to play in the bubble? I know the television money is huge, but the expenses that they have, especially with the price that they've been paying for testing now, is rather exorbitant. I saw a story today, it came from Woj at ESPN, and he said the NBA could delay the beginning of next year's season, 20, I guess that would be 2021.
2021, right.
Yeah. They would delay that all the way to March if they felt there was a vaccine in the offing that would allow them to have fans in stands and they could play at home.
Well, but I would see, to me, I just, again, maybe I'm being the pessimist here or the realist, I'm not sure. I don't see that happening. I could see where the NBA is more inclined to try to start a season, albeit later, maybe in December, maybe not play an 82-game season, but to play in not just one bubble, but two, because they can do that. Remember, when they originally did the idea of the bubble, there were 8 locations that were considered, including the Bahamas and Las Vegas and Louisville, and so they could play in 2 bubbles. And the NHL could probably get away with playing in 4 bubble cities if you're going to play the entire season. You could probably do that. The problem is whether or not players are going to want to be holed up for that long. Now, you're talking about players that are being holed up for as long as 2.5 months if they make the final. But if you're talking about a whole season where a team is basically stuck in a hotel
without family,
that's going to be really, really hard.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's amazing that things are going as they are now, but I have my doubts about not just college sports. I still have my doubts about the NFL.
Yeah, George, everything's so up in the air. It's almost hard to take one side or the other at this point. But let's say the NBA does start the 2021 NBA season. Who's going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, and what was your opinion on them letting go Boylan?
Well, I think that was inevitable. I think there was speculation that because there would be basically maybe no fans next year and revenue, that the Bulls would keep Boylan, that the Reinsdorfs would do that. But by virtue of giving the power to Arturas Karnisovas, who is the vice president of operations, they basically said, it's your team. And by letting him make the decision to let Boylan go, they really are entrusting him with the power to reshape this franchise. Remember, they are one of 8 teams that have not been able to play basketball at all since March. Very, very difficult, too. So, I mean, there are several candidates that are possibilities for the Bulls, from Kenny Atkinson to Adrian Griffin, who obviously has some issues that he has to tackle. The assistant coach for the 76ers is a possibility unless they fire their head coach. So, but they are going to go in the direction of getting, probably my guess is, a first-year coach that's been a really good assistant coach. And you've got, the general manager, Eversley, so he's got the Philadelphia connections and the Toronto connections. Karnišovas has the Denver connections, and so they're going to probably bring somebody in, but much more of a player's coach. Jim Boylan was very miscast as a head coach, very miscast. You know, his intentions were good for him, but it didn't work with his team at all. They questioned a lot of what he was doing out there. And even he said, listen, I was brought in here to kind of put some respect back into the team, some discipline. Well, he did it in a way in which he kind of lost his team from the get-go. So, no, I'm not surprised that he is fired. But, you know, I'm going to be more surprised as to when the Bulls can actually get on the court and practice.
Yeah. So you're thinking they might go along the lines of what Memphis did. Take a hot young coach with a good team, like they did with Taylor Jenkins off of Milwaukee, and give him a shot. And you give the guy a 2-year deal, and if he's good, after the first year, you re-sign him.
Yeah, you let him grow with the team, and obviously they're doing a lot of homework. They know, I'm pretty sure they know what they want. They absolutely know what they want. You know, who that guy will be remains to be seen, but they have their list, and they probably had that list for a long, long time. No matter what Karnišovas said, I'm sure that the idea of letting Boylan go probably was a long time ago. They did it when the end of the regular season occurred in the NBA, right before these playoffs begin. That's when he made the official decision. Well, my guess is that decision was made a while ago. They announced it then, so they've got a pretty good idea of what kind of coach they want running this team. And they're going to need, listen, it's not just the coach that they bring in. This is a franchise that has had problems with getting free agents and problems with keeping players healthy. I mean, over the last 2 or 3 years, they've just had an inordinate amount of injuries. So if you can keep, you know, a Wendell Carter Jr. healthy, or a Lauri Markkanen healthy, or even Otto Porter Jr., who they made the trade for, and the guy's getting $27 million a year for, I mean, at least another year. I mean, he's barely played a game for the Bulls. I mean, if they were healthy, they could win a few more games, and if they have a pretty decent coach, they could probably be a team that wins 35 plus. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've only won 22, 35 is a lot.
You mentioned all those injuries, though, and we've had this discussion before. I mean, the Grizzlies lost 3 key parts in the bubble to their team.
Yeah.
I have never seen a league with more injuries to key players than this league has. And when I don't know if it's pace of play or that they play so high above the rim now, but when you and I were in college watching the Bulls, Jerry Sloan's Norm Van Leer teams with Love and with Walker, there weren't the injuries that we see now in this league.
I don't think we saw all these injuries when Jordan was around as well.
Yeah.
But then again, we never saw as many pitching injuries until the last 15 or 20 years. Remember, you know, for those people who are a little bit younger, back in the day, pitchers were on 4 days rest, not 5.
Yeah.
They pitched 300-plus innings. They made 40-plus starts, and they pitched like that every year. Now, if you don't have Tommy John surgery, you're lucky.
Hard to figure.
It is.
I don't get it. Last thing before we let you go. George Hoffman from Chicago. You mentioned you're not sure about the NFL. You're the first person that has just come right out and said you have your doubts about that. And again, I'll go with broadcasters that I know around the league that are definitely preparing to play under new protocol and discussing travel and things of that nature. Why do you have such grave doubts about pros that are fairly isolated, at least with camps?
It's the nature of the sport in itself. That's number one. And you have so many more players where you can't make a mistake. Okay? Mm-hmm. You can't have one player make a mistake. You've got 53 players. You don't have 15 like the NBA or 20 like the NHL or 25 or 30 even in Major League Baseball.
Well, you've got 60 with that with the squad, with the taxi squad.
Yeah, and you've also got the nature of that particular sport. You could say the same thing about the NBA, but you've got to have everybody on the same page where you can't do anything. You can't go out. And remember, they're home for how many, 4 or 5 days before they travel to a site, unless they're playing at home that week. That means they've got to be very, very, very careful about not doing anything except go home, come back to the practice facility.
Right.
It's a discipline that all you need is one guy to get off the reservation, and you've got big trouble.
Sure.
That's why the Cleveland Indians are very lucky at the moment that nobody did test positive. Just 2 guys went off the reservation, and what they did there was they said, not only are you off the reservation, you're off the team for doing it.
Right.
So the NFL may start. I just have a lot of doubts whether or not they're going to be able to play a full season.
George, as always, we love chatting with you. We'll do it again sometime soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. That is George
Thanks, George.
Hoffman, sportscaster in Chicago. He's brought to you in part by Supercuts, and you know Supercuts around here are family business. They're owned by the Czech family. Nothing is more important to them than the health and safety of their team and, of course, the Memphis community. All of the Memphis area Supercuts are reopened. They're seeing clients with the safest ways and measures that you can. They have a thing called the Safe Salon Commitment. The Safe Salon Commitment was developed in partnership with the top infectious disease doctors to maximize safety and sanitization in all of the Supercut salons, which means when you're ready for a haircut, and I think all are, you're going to get to go into a place that is absolutely prepared to see you. You can learn more about the Safe Salon Commitment and prepare for your visit to Supercuts by going to supercuts.com. We take a break. When we come back, we will give you our Rust medals. A little bit later, we will give you our NBA picks, too. We got lots of things to cover on this Monday edition of Sports Time on Sports 56.
We are Sports 56. It's time on Sports 56 with Wolo and Stats. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by Homer Skelton Hyundai. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brad Norsworthy.
Welcome back in. Been a busy day. Already we've got one winner in overtime in the NBA playoffs. The Nuggets over the Utah Jazz despite Donovan Mitchell with 57 points. Wow. 88-79. The Nets trying to come back on the Raptors with 3:09 to go. In the third, the defending champions are up by 9. George referred to a story out of North Carolina today, which is basically, and this comes from Brett McMurphy, that the University, North Carolina, announced it would shift to remote classes starting on Wednesday after there were COVID clusters during the first week of classes. I mentioned at the very beginning, this was the fear that I had. This is why I think if you're in a bubble and you're a college football student and you're the only one on campus and the others are really not on campus or, maybe in some housing situations, but they're not going to classes together, you're still in your own little bubble. It seems to me to be a little bit safer. And this just coming in from WRG News Channel 3, that Harding Academy confirms that they have had some COVID-19 cases now that I guess school has come back there at Harding Academy. I did look really quick because I know there's 2 from the area that are playing high school football this week, and Glenn Rogers is going to join us on Fridays, he always does, to talk about it. But they were Christian Brothers at Houston on Friday and Briarcrest at Collierville. Harding is not scheduled that I could see to play high school football this week. Of course, we will keep our eye on all of that. In the meantime, we promised you we would give you some Rust medals, and I've got a couple. 901 FC lost another game. They did this after having an early lead. This is a theme. They would give up late goals at the end of a first half or the end of a ball game last year. That was the sort of part of their MO, and I thought, man, maybe this year it would change. It is not. It has been that way from the very beginning. They had leads in this game twice and lost 3-2 to a team that I think they're every bit as good or better than. They lost on the road in Charlotte, and now they remain in the bottom of Group G. And they have to play Birmingham this week. And Birmingham was a team they played earlier in the year and lost 3-0. So this does not look good for the 901 FC to make the playoffs this year. And coming into the season, I was pretty sure, of course, this is pre-pandemic, but I really felt like they'd made some great changes, that they would be a playoff team. I know Tim Mulqueen has to be really, really disappointed. And then I give a rust to Lisa Salters from ESPN. And I love Lisa Salters, and I think she's really good at her gig. She's a Monday Night Football sideline reporter. That's how good she is. She's in the new Monday Night Football grouping. We'll talk a little bit about that later because they have announced their team. But after her interviews with Lillard and McCollum after their defeat of the Grizzlies on Saturday, so she's doing the social distancing speaking, right? And they're 6 feet away on their own microphone. That's a boom mic, right? After she's done with them, they walk away. She calls them back, and on camera, she hugs them.
Ooh.
What the heck was she doing with the distancing if she's going to end up hugging them?
Can't be doing that.
That's
for sure.
a rust.
Definitely get a rust for that. And speaking of that broadcast, man, I didn't know Tyler Jenkins was the head coach of the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, how do you not correct him? How did they said it multiple times throughout the entire broadcast?
I don't know.
It's Taylor Jenkins, not Tyler Jenkins.
Terrible.
My rust, mentioned it earlier when we were doing precious metals, giving a rust to Roel Ramiz from the Cardinals, who became the first pitcher in Major League history to give up back-to-back home runs in his Major League debut.
Back-to-back to the mighty Chicago White Sox. That is hard to believe. This portion of the show brought to you by the Eflin Insurance Group. When you want a great value without sacrificing great service, I want you to think Eflin Insurance, the entire Eflin Insurance team. Matt, well, he's got professionals that access 10 leading companies to find the right home and auto program that will fit all of your needs and your budget. Need commercial insurance? Hey, guys, Hey, gals, they're ready. They're ready at the Eflin Insurance Group. They have virtually unlimited access to programs to protect your small to mid-sized business. So, yes, this is a company that does commercial and personal. And let's not forget life insurance. Eflin has you covered there as well with quotes from 15 well-respected companies. You won't have to wonder if you've gotten a good deal. You know you will. Call Grant, Andrew, or Heath at 901-386-GRR. They're Tiger fans. That's 901-386-GRRR4777. They'll be happy to give you a quote today. Proud supporters of the Tigers. That's the Eflin Insurance Group. Back with hour number 3, we will chat with our man in the morning, Anthony Sane from The Morning Show. He is next.
stations. Welcome back to Sports Time on Sports 56 with Waldo and Stats. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by DeSoto Auto Sales. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brett Norsworthy.
Welcome in hour number 3 on this marvelous Monday, and I mean marvelous. It feels like almost like fall. I could see walking out of here and going to a high school football game, which we hope they're supposed to be. 2 games coming up in Shelby County, one in Collierville, one at Houston this Friday. I hope that is the case. We shall see, but as of right now, that is certainly on the docket. Today, we've already had one heck of an NBA game. Donovan Mitchell puts up 57, but Utah falls to Denver, the better seed, in overtime down in Orlando in the bubble. And the defending champion Toronto Raptors, they built a big lead over the Nets. The Nets are trying to come back. Now they've played 3, and that lead, which was once 20-something, is now down to 95-86. Celtics 76ers a little bit later, and the nightcap and the quad header is the Clippers and the Mavericks. Welcome in, by the way, Drew Barrett, filling in the next couple of weeks for the vacationing, and a well-deserved vacation for Brett Norsworthy. Carl Morris is our engineer. In the mornings, you, I know, are tuned in to hear Anthony Sane with Peter, and every Monday now, at least through the NBA playoffs, we will talk with Anthony Sane as well. And Anthony, last time I had a chance to converse with you, because I went on a little vacay myself, was right before the Grizzlies started to play in the bubble. I know you had some thoughts and expectations as you have seen them play it out, and what a great game we all got to witness on Saturday. They were short on several fronts, including experience, and I thought that showed. And then, unfortunately, one guy got hurt that was still magnificent in John Morant. What is your overall reaction to the way the Grizzlies played and the season came to an end this 2020 season?
I was, of course, disappointed when things weren't looking like they were going to go the way that we all hoped going into the game, but after watching that final game that lost to Portland, I was very satisfied just with the effort by the guys and just looking towards the future with the talent we have and just the potential of this team. Like I said, you had those injuries to Justice Winslow, Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyus Jones. Those injuries definitely set the team back. But just to see them come together and just give it all they had against Portland, it definitely was promising. Me and Peter talked last Friday about what we thought the keys to victory for the Grizzlies would be, and we said 3 things, basically. We said that John Morant would probably have to have his best game of the bubble. We said that Dylan Brooks would have to play under control and have a nice, efficient, high-scoring game. And we also said that someone else on the team would have to step up offensively. And all 3 of those things happened with Brandon Clark chipping in and having a big game against Portland. But we just came up a little short at the end. Crucial turnovers during some key stretches of the game, a couple of defensive lapses or whatever, and just big shots by guys like C.J. McCollum, Damian Lillard, and Carmelo Anthony, guys who've been there, done that plenty of times. So, but other than that, man, it was just a great game. Just as a fan of the NBA, not particularly as a fan of the Grizzlies, just a great battle to see the Grizzlies come back from that early deficit and just give Portland everything they can handle on Saturday.
Yeah, Anthony, it was a great game, and I think definitely, hands down, the best game the Grizzlies played in the bubble, the 9 that they did end up playing in Orlando. Now, looking towards the future off of what we saw on Saturday, that type of game, that type of team performance, is that something you think Grizzlies fans should expect next year or hope for?
Yeah, I think the future's really bright with the team. I think something that a lot of fans have to understand, though, is that our team might be worse as far as standings in the West next year, but it could be a very much better team, and also with better prospect looking towards the future as well. You got Golden State coming back. You expect the Pelicans are going to gear up for next season. The Suns might be better. Several things could happen in the West where the Grizzlies might not be able to be an 8-9 seed in the West next year, but the promise is still good, especially with that us having a 2021 draft pick. Assuming that we come off of the pick that we owe Boston this year, It's still a rebuilding team. We have to remember that the team played well above their heads this year and were much better than expectations. I just think our fans have to remember that it's still the first year of a rebuild, so we don't really know what we'll see next year with the team or what the organizational strategy would be going into next season.
I think your attitude is the prevailing attitude. This team does get a lot of latitude from the fans, and part of it is they really overexcelled this year. If you looked at the over/under of 22, well, they were more than 10 games better than that. They came within a whisker of making the playoffs, and so I can understand the pass this year. I'm not sure when you watch how good you just mentioned Phoenix was in the bubble, 8-0. I don't know that they'll be able to carry all that over, but they've got a really good young team, and they got a superstar in Booker. Now you take into account, and I've matched it up, at least at this point, I think if you go head-to-head, New Orleans and Memphis, New Orleans might have a little bit better, deeper personnel. And it's been a bad matchup for Memphis. And then you mentioned Golden State, and everybody else who's good is back. Denver's only going to get better. Utah's going to stay good. This league, this West, is really talented, and many of these teams are young. When do you think it is fair that the Grizzlies will be expected to be a playoff team, to be a contender?
It's kind of hard to gauge. I mean, we don't really know what they'll look like next year, what moves they'll make. Me personally, I'm not going to put any rush on it because, like I said, I totally understand that this is the first year of a rebuild. And I just think the Grizzlies need to constantly keep being better and just gauge where Jaren and Ja are as far as, like, in their headspace, where they are with the team. And just keep those – as long as you keep those two guys happy and continue to put winning pieces around those guys, I don't think anyone should rush, including the front office, as far as rushing the rebuild. They think they should let it happen as naturally as possible. I do think they do need some upgrades on the wing. Those seem to be glaring needs in the bubble. You saw a lot of times. It seemed like we just couldn't score enough points, and we couldn't score points enough from the perimeter as far as shooting and just guys that can create off the dribble and things like that. So that's something I think that you need to improve on because those are the type of things that can frustrate John and Jaren immediately. Those are the things that can make those guys struggle and have doubts about the team. If you don't have guys that can just simply, drive and kick guys, you can kick out to relieve some of that pressure off of Ja when he's going to the basket. So I think that's something they really do need to address. Whether that's a high tier guy or not, that's still to be determined. But they need some type of upgrades on the perimeter at their wing position.
Yeah, and speaking of Ja, it came out after the game that apparently he's been playing the last 4 games with a broken thumb. Did you hear anything about this before it came out over the weekend? I mean, could you tell something might be wrong with him from watching? Because I certainly couldn't.
Anthony,
Zane, you there?
Have we lost you?
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm not going to really get into what I heard before it came out, but I did kind of notice that Ja didn't look right, and I think it might have been a little more than maybe the thumb. I think over time he may have healed for some other stuff. He just didn't look like the same player physically in the later games that he looked like in the earlier games. So, but yeah, it's just a testament to how good of a player Ja is, how determined he is, how tough he is to come out there and do his thing to push through that thumb injury. But yeah, man, like I said, he's a phenomenal player. He's a next level type player, and to see him on that big stage go toe-to-toe with Damian Lillard was amazing. And in that duel, John really got the best of him as far as those two players are concerned. But, of course, Portland was able to come out on top.
I agree. I think the only thing that was disappointing, and now when you hear about the thumb, it's explained, he did have uncharacteristically too many turnovers, particularly at crucial times. I don't. And now that can get explained where your handle's not quite as good if you have lost the thumb on one of your hands. We all know he has the potential to be the greatest Grizzly who ever played.
Oh, yeah,
and you're talking about guys that were rookies of the year in Pau Gasol. You were talking about his brother who was defensive player of the year for the whole league, and this is the guy that I think has a real shot at being the best overall player that ever wore the Grizzlies uniform. So he's a positive. I think Grayson Allen certainly proved that he is worthy of taking a good look at because he can shoot and he's physical enough. And it seems like some of those early immature ways that were undisciplined and dirty, frankly, I think it seems to me he has those under control. The one guy that I had a lot of confidence coming into in this bubble was DeAnthony Melton, and I'm not sure I feel the same way. Dylan Brooks took over too often for his capabilities. Were the two losers in the bubble Melton and Brooks? What's your sense of those two guys?
I definitely think that Melton was coming to this summer, coming to this offseason. A lot of people said that Anthony Melton was going to get the full mid-level exception from that, or that a team may possibly outbid the Grizzlies for DeAnthony. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he kind of I was always kind of iffy about that anyway, as far as spending too much on DeAnthony. Now I think the Grizzlies have a major decision to make with their salary cap being pretty full. They don't have room to really bring in a new free agent unless they use that mid-level exception. I think they got to take a hard look to see if that's the route they want to go, spending that money on DeAnthony, because they don't have many options. And with the way that Grayson came out, man, like knocking down shots, playing defense, being scrappy, being able to get to the basket, just making timely plays. Me personally, I think Grayson coming into next season may have replaced DeAnthony's spot in the rotation. Not particularly replaced him on the team, but I think he should be replacing him as that first shooting guard coming off the bench. Because DeAnthony is a guy we saw that he hasn't been good in backup point guard minutes at all this season. So that was always an advantage that he had. He's the guy you thought you could use all over the court. But with Justice Winslow, if he's healthy, if he can get some of those ball handling, playmaking minutes, it kind of makes Grayson the guy that you would pull up as your first shooting guard off the bench now. And I just really think the Grizzlies should think hard before they sign DeAnthony to any type of lengthy or expensive or possibly sign him for the mid-level exception.
Zane, last thing for me, I know that you said that you think that the seeding is probably not going to be as good as it was this year, probably won't be around the 8 or 9. What about record-wise when we do have all 82? Do you think the Grizzlies eclipse the 34-win mark that they set this year?
Yeah, I think they'll be better than that. I think they'll be somewhere in that 40-game range, somewhere very close to 500. But I just think it's going to be tough. I think just simply getting Golden State back healthy. Because I think all the teams are above us, except for possibly Oklahoma City, are going to be right there good again. So it's just a big question mark as far as if they'll be able to get into the playoffs. As far as teams like Phoenix are concerned, I'm not really super concerned with them because Phoenix kind of does this. Like, getting off the hot starts is kind of what they do. Like, beginning of this season, they want to say they started off like 6 or 7-0 as well, but they came back down to earth and then didn't win many games after that quick start. That's kind of what they do once they get a reset or restart or whatever. So I'm not really worried about them. But like I said, you think the Pelicans would be better. But even with them, you don't know because you'd assume that J.J. Redick's not coming back. And possibly Jrue Holiday might want out of that situation. It's kind of rocky there in New Orleans right now. So you're not really sure what that team may end up doing.
Speaking of which, were you surprised Alvin Gentry got booted?
Nah, I knew someone was going to take a fall because that team is extremely disappointing. I joke about them all the time. But just all jokes aside, that team should have been much better than that. Much better than that. That team had a lot of expectations coming into the season, even though it was a new situation where you were taking guys, from various places. You lose Anthony Davis, but you got Zion Williamson late in the season, and they had a losing record with him playing games. And I just think something happened chemistry-wise once they added Zion to that mix. If you guys are Grizzlies fans, covered the Grizzlies, so you guys remember when Rudy Gay was here. We had similar struggles where Rudy and Zach Randolph, they didn't have the same skill set, but they scored in the same areas of the paint and of the court. Mm-hmm. And it kind of caused that logjam where those guys on the court, they kind of did the same, scored the same way. Scored in the same places, so it caused those issues. I kind of see that same thing going on with that Pelicans team where they actually seemed like they were a better team before Zion came. I know a lot of people came at me hard on Twitter when I said I was noticing that. But I think the proof is in the pudding. That team, it's like they're trying to readjust things for Zion, but they had things kind of going very well during a certain stretch of the season before Zion came back.
Last thing for Anthony Shane, and we'll, of course, be talking to him next week as well, but who wins the East? Who wins the West?
I think the Bucks come out of the East pretty easy. That Toronto team's good. They're very good. But I think the Bucks come out of that conference easy. I actually have the Clippers coming out of the West, and I think you'll see a rematch of the Eastern Conference Finals game series with Giannis versus Kawhi Leonard. That's what I have for my personal prediction. Of course, the Lakers are going to be great. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers did end up coming out. But I think the injuries to the Lakers in their backcourt defensively are going to hurt them a lot. And also as well as lacking playmakers. That team strictly has LeBron James is their only real playmaker on that team. And I'm really big on guys that can take and create and make shots. And the Lakers kind of lack those type of guys. But, of course, they got Anthony Davis, who's one of the better players in the NBA, who's going to cause matchup nightmares regardless of who's on the other side. But I just kind of feel like that Clippers team is more battle-tested and ready across the board for their championship this year.
He is Anthony Sane. You listen to him every morning with Peter Edmiston, 7 to 10, right here on Sports 56. Thanks, Anthony. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Bro. All right, man.
Appreciate it.
Anthony, brought to you in part by Conway. Conway Services, heating, cooling, plumbing, electric, and you've got an old energy-guzzling air conditioning system. Last couple of weeks have been hard. You need, maybe, to replace that guzzler. You can get one right now that pays for itself. They have air conditioning systems in Conway for as low as $79 a month. You replace your old energy guzzler for $79 a month if you've got approved credit. And with today's more efficient models, you could be saving money on your utility bill every month. I bet it comes out to about the same. Are you amazed? It pays for itself. So the next time you have air conditioning problems, please call my guys at Conway. And you're going to get that award-winning service every time on Google. 8,000 top-notch reports. It's the best. All you got to do is make the call. 384-3511. 384-3511. Conway Services, heating, cooling, plumbing, and electric. All right, my friend, Mr. Drew, let's make our NBA picks. You want to start with stats? Let's go with what he sent you. We'll start with the East and 1 versus 8, Milwaukee, Orlando.
In that matchup, Brett has Milwaukee.
I'm not surprised. Then a lower half of that little bracket would be 4 Indiana against 5 Miami.
He takes Miami.
All right. Then lower in the East, number 3 Boston over Philadelphia.
Brett has Boston in that one.
He has Boston, and then Toronto and Brooklyn. Toronto, the 2 seed, playing right now and up in the fourth quarter.
He has Raptors, and he did send these picks in before the games all started. So.
All right, so that means he's got Milwaukee and Toronto playing for the Eastern Conference title.
I'm guessing. He's only sent me the first round.
Oh.
Yeah, I only have through the first round for him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did it all the way through.
Oh.
I thought we were supposed to.
I mean, I can do it all the way through.
No, if he didn't, no. So I'm exactly the same as him. I got Milwaukee beating Orlando. I got Miami beating Indiana. I got Boston beating Philadelphia. I got Toronto beating Brooklyn, and that would be where we are. Have you got anything different?
The only one of those that I have different is I've got Indiana beating Miami. I think that's the only one out of the East that goes the distance, and I think the Pacers get it done.
Okay, and so both Brett and I took the 5 seed over the 4. Other way, okay. In the West, Lakers over Portland, Houston over Oak City, Denver over Utah, and they're up 1-0, and the Clippers over the Mavs.
For the West, me and Brett are exactly the same. We both got Lakers coming out of that one. Then we've got Clippers winning, Jazz in the Jazz-Denver series. And both me and Brett have OKC over the Houston Rockets.
So we both differ. I differ from the two of you. I've got Houston and Denver. Okay. I'm absolutely amazed he didn't go all the way through.
Yeah, he just sent me the first round.
Ha. Interesting. My question would be, and we're going to have to ask him, because I think he needs to get those in. Because otherwise, if we've picked all the way through, we get penalized if our team doesn't win. Are we repicking second round then?
I think we'll repick round by round.
We're not reseeding like they do in the NHL.
No. We're not going to reseed. But we just didn't fill out the full bracket this year.
Just wanted to be sure. on all of that.
I know you're over there trying to figure out how to win some type of picking contest, since golf is definitely not going to work out for you this year. We didn't rig it for you this year, these are fair results.
Let me just say this: that is not the case, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. You went with this little gimmicky thing where you make a second pick, which was supposed to be a shock pick anyway, and you go with a second pick.
Dave, my second pick last week was 115th in the world.
And then we've got doubles points, and then we've got quadruple. You get $8 million on one guy, and you think that's good? Gosh,
I mean, Dave, you didn't pick
terrible.
him. You didn't pick Colin Morikawa, did you? You didn't pick Siwoo. You didn't tell Ted to pick Siwoo Kim for you last week.
Colin Morikawa won this thing for you on a fluky deal. First of all, he shouldn't even be a pick in those things. You got to have a shock pick.
Dave,
Colin Morikawa
had the
was
same
already
chance
a top
to take
25
him
guy.
as I
no,
did.
you got the choice before me.
Well, then you could have used your first pick on him.
Then I wouldn't have gotten $8 million either. This portion of the show is brought to you by Homer. Homer, Skelton Hyundai, Genesis of Olive Branch, home of great technology. So good you get a lifetime limited powertrain warranty on every new vehicle. And on top of that, with all the new 20 and 21 models, and they've started to arrive, you get a 3-year, 36,000-mile maintenance package on every new Hyundai, on every new Genesis. It could be my G70, fastest car I've ever owned. But, man, does it perform, and it's safe. All these cars are safe. Hyundais, by the way, tied for the most number of top safety pick vehicles in 2020. That comes from J.D. Power. Tucson, number one in 2020 compact SUV. The Veloster, the 2020 compact sporty car, number one. These are all just great accolades for this great product. Now, let me tell you about my friend's service, like the Hyundai Certified Pre-Owned vehicle that also gets a 100,000-mile limited lifetime powertrain warranty. They take care of you. That's why their crew has been together forever. All you got to do to find out is get on Lamar. It becomes Highway 78 at State Line Road, and then the very first exit is number 1. Craft Road. You turn left, and you'll see the guys that have been together for years, taking care of people, reselling cars all the time because that's their passion, and people trust them. You go find out why. Everybody loves doing business with Homer, Skelton Hyundai, and Genesis of Olive Branch. We take a time out. When we come back, more on the Grizzlies, and we do it with the voice on television of the Grizzlies. Pete Pranica is next.
R&R on Sports Saturday.
Sportstime on Sports 56 with Waldo and Stats. This hour of Sportstime is brought to you by DeSoto Auto Sales. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brett Norsworthy.
Welcome in as we cruise through our final hour. The SEC unveiled their opening week of college football, hopefully September the 26th. Ole Miss will play at Florida. Mississippi State will play, or I think Florida plays in Oxford. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's at Ole Miss.
And then Mississippi State has to go to LSU. Mike Leach, brutal. All the new coaches got tough first games, and as our friend David Cobb pointed out, there really were not the major blockbuster games like they were toying with the idea of the Iron Bowl or the Egg Bowl to start the season to make sure it got in, and they didn't go that way.
Yeah, I thought that's what they were going to do. You know, when we had the rescheduling, a lot of people were saying, you know, we don't know if we're going to be able to – one, if we're going to be able to start, and two, if we're going to be able to finish, and how long we're going to be able to go. Say we only get 3 weeks of the season in, we got to make sure some of these long time rivalries continue. We got to make sure we play the largest outdoor cocktail party, the oldest rivalry in the South, the famed third Saturday in October. We got to get these things in a little bit sooner.
Well, maybe they'll be week 2. We'll find out in about 30 minutes when the SEC releases the entire football schedule. In the meantime, 119, make it 120, 102. The Raptors over the Nets at the bubble, game 2 of the doubleheader. In game 1, what a game. It went to overtime. Donovan Mitchell had 57 points in the loss, and the Denver Nuggets were able to get past the Utah Jazz. The Grizzlies played one whale of a game on Saturday to try to get into these playoffs. It was not meant to be. Portland was able to hold on and win the game. Heroics, one of the great games by Ja, and we find out after the game he's got a broken thumb. Incredible stuff. On the call, on TV for every Grizzlies game is Pete Pranica. Did you have any idea Ja had a broken thumb and was doing all this Superman stuff?
We're in Memphis, they're in Orlando.
I know.
We had absolutely no idea. I mean, we had seen that the right thumb had been wrapped, but it had been. I mean, he's had wraps, and I can't remember which hands, but I mean, he had wraps before. I mean, you really don't read too much into that, particularly because one of the cardinal rules of our business is you never speculate on injuries. So, we reported that he had a wrap around his thumb. But other than that, we didn't know the extent of the injury, and certainly it wasn't going to be disclosed.
You've done, I'm trying to remember. You might have come the 5th year the Grizzlies were here, or
I was here in the fall of 2004, so I've been here as long as FedEx Forum has been in operation.
Okay, so you and before that you were doing games for other teams,
right?
Have you seen a more charismatic guy as a rookie than John Morant?
Boy, it's really hard to find somebody who has burst upon the scene the way that he has, and as in a starring role as the alpha on a team. A lot of times you'll see great rookies come in and they will perform very well, but they're a complimentary piece. Ja is not a complimentary piece. He is the piece as far as the Grizzlies are concerned, and it's been remarkable. And I was talking with assistant coach Brad Jones during the bubble, and he said, "You're not going to believe how good Ja is going to be, just based on the steps that he made between the suspension of the season in mid-March and then coming into camp." He said, "This kid has taken it to another level." And I was like, "Well, what other level is there?" And he said, "Watch and see." And certainly that was on full display Saturday against the Portland Trailblazers. Just a remarkable game. I mean, he did make mistakes down the stretch. There were a couple of ill-advised jump passes, but he's going to learn from those things. But without him playing as dynamically and as forcefully as he was playing against Portland, Memphis probably is not even in the conversation of winning that game.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, Ja just went off on Saturday and had one of the best games I can remember. Probably have to go back to early March, late February. I mean, I don't really can't remember one right before the shutdown, so probably even February. But going from the outstanding rookie for the Grizzlies to the rookie head coach Taylor Jenkins, what grade would you give him for the bubble?
I'd give him a B plus. When you go into the bubble, you have everybody healthy. You think, okay, for the first time, we've got everybody, including Justice Winslow. And then Winslow goes down. And then Tyus Jones plays the scrimmages, and he's got a sore knee and is not able to go. And then you're halfway through the seeding games, and Jaren goes down with a torn meniscus. You're playing with a much shorter deck, which, than what you had anticipated. If you had gone into the bubble saying Jaren's not going to play, Tyus isn't going to play, okay, now you can set your training camp up around those realities. Well, you couldn't do that, so you had to adjust on the fly. I think that he did a really, really good job keeping this group together. They were focused. But the thing of it is, when you have such a young team, and I was talking with Doug Christie out in Sacramento a couple of days ago, and you have to go through the fire. You have to sustain your wounds. You have to have your scars in order for you to take the next step. And so this is where this young group got some scars. They got some wounds. They're going to learn from them, and they will be better. You're talking about, of course, Jaren, didn't play, obviously, the last few games, but you're talking about a couple of 20 and 21-year-olds, basically, and you're introducing them to essentially playoff basketball. I mean, literally, the seeding games weren't playoff basketball, but for all intents and purposes, they really were. And if you've not been around playoff basketball, if you've not experienced it, it's an entirely different animal. So clearly they're going to learn from this, because the issue that the Grizzlies had is they got into the clutch games, which in the NBA is defined final 5 minutes, margins within 5 points. Grizzlies lost all of the games that they were within 5 in the final 5 minutes. They did not have the ability to close those games out, and that's a sign of a young team. And but I think what Taylor Jenkins has done in terms of establishing a culture, getting everybody on board with him. When a guy like Kyle Anderson, who's been with San Antonio, says, this is the closest locker room, this is the closest team I've ever been around, that says a lot for what Taylor Jenkins did as a head coach with his basketball team.
I agree. He created a culture. He did. And we know what you're going to get with Jaren Jackson. And I that's 2 years now. When he's healthy, what he brings. And I think we know what Tyus Jones brings too. I want to go to Justice Winslow. What does he bring, do you think, to this team?
Well, what he brings more than anything else is going to be versatility, because the guy can guard 1 through 4. And that is the future and the present, really, of the NBA, is your Swiss Army knife type guys who can guard multiple positions, that you can switch and it's not going to hurt you. He has the ability also to play make, to handle the ball, and one of the reasons that the Grizzlies were so excited to get him was because he could handle the ball and Ja could play off the ball. And hopefully Ja would have a little bit more energy to attack the rim and do the things that he likes to do. But if you're bringing it up, initiating the offense, and then you've got to go ahead and try and finish, it adds a few miles to the tires. But to have a guy like Justice Winslow who can distribute the basketball and his three-point shooting is on the uptick, it was looked upon by the Grizzlies front office like this is a versatile guy who can do a lot of things for us. Unfortunately, we've not been able to see that in game action yet.
And another guy that played definitely his best game of the bubble on Saturday, Dillon Brooks. Going forward, how do you kind of get Dillon Brooks to get out of the mindset of I've got to do it all, I've got to be the one to win the ball game, like he kind of was at Oregon before he made it to the Grizzlies? Even somewhat in that role before we had Ja Morant. How do you kind of get him out of that shoot happy type of mentality that he's in?
It's a work in progress with the coaching staff, where they're talking with him about what's a good shot, what's not a good shot. One of the things that this staff does is they grade every single shot. Was this a good shot? Was this not an average shot, or was this a poor shot decision? So they want Dillon to play with an edge, but there is always that line that you go up to that line, but you don't want to go over the line. And so his aggression, his tenacity, his physical nature, those are all good things. But yeah, I mean, the coaching staff does work with him and say, okay, sometimes, you need to rein it in a little bit and get your shots within the flow of the offense rather than coming down in an early shot clock 3 or an ill-advised shot or an off-balance shot or whatever. So, this coaching staff, they're all big fans of Dylan Brooks. They love what he brings to the table. And but like I said, it's a daily reminder. It's like, okay, we're playing within the team concept. These are good shots. These are the shots we want you to take. Take shots that you're comfortable with. Don't rush shots. Which I'm sure it's not all that unusual from dealing with every other player, is grading their shot selection and what you want them to do.
I think it's tricky with him. I agree with you. That's why coaches get paid a lot of money. The thing about Dylan Brooks is it's that aggression that makes him a good player, because he's not the quickest guy. He doesn't jump the highest. He himself has said that, but it is his tenacious play. And you don't want him to lose that aggression, but you got to realize with this team,
I don't need you shooting 30 times a night.
He's never going to be the top 1 or 2 options, right? I mean, he's going to be the third best option most of the time, and so I guess that does become tricky. Pete, this is a tricky question. The Grizzlies at the beginning of the year, look, the over/under in Vegas was 22. They were clearly better than any of us thought. But they were in a position with a 3.5-game lead with 8 games to go in this bubble to make the playoffs, and they didn't make it. They lost the position. They got to 9, and we know it was by the thinnest of hairs, and Portland didn't do them any favors along the way. But is this disappointing at all that they didn't get into the playoffs?
If we had played the regular 82-game schedule, and given how hard Memphis' schedule was down the stretch, the result may have been the same.
Yeah.
I mean, that's entirely possible. This was a team that had, I think, by many barometers, had overachieved. If we had played all 82, they might still have missed the playoffs, even with a 3.5-game lead. I mean, they had a couple games left with Portland. They had a couple games left with New Orleans. Although, and you want to talk about disappointing, let's talk about New Orleans. All right, everybody's glamour child. When you went into the bubble, you were playing teams. Portland's a tough matchup because they've got guys who can make shots. They've got guys. I mean, they were in the Western Conference Finals a year ago, and the only reason that Portland was, out of the top 8 was the fact that Nurkic was hurt and had not been available to them. So Portland comes back as a totally different team. So, like I said, if you had played all 82, maybe they still don't make it because of the strength of schedule. The strength of schedule from the get-go in the seeding games was among the toughest. You can look at 3.5-game lead, and boy, that's disappointing. But look, Portland got on an ungodly run. Phoenix got on an ungodly run, winning all 8 seeding games.
And got nothing.
So, and shoot, you don't want to ever focus on one possession because there are so many possessions of the game. But I look at, Brevin and I continue to talk about it, the 3 that they gave up at the end of the first quarter to Patty Mills of San Antonio. All it takes is one possession that can cost you a game. And then all of a sudden you're not 8, you're 9. And now you got to beat Portland twice, which is really, really, really hard. So is it disappointing? Yes. But like I said, we could have played all 82 and the results may or may not have been the same. We just don't know. And again, obviously you were playing half the seeding games without Jaren and none of the seeding games with Tyus Jones. You did not have a backup point guard. You had to do it by committee. And Tyus is the league leader in assist to turnover ratio, and he's super efficient, can hit the floater. And I mean, his absence, I think, was a huge, huge factor why the Grizzlies weren't able to hang on to that 8th seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Pete, now that the season is officially done and over for the Grizzlies, that means off-season. We all know what that means. Rumors and questions around free agency, re-signing players. Do you think that the front office is going to do some moving and shaking, or do you think that the roster that we saw in the bubble, hopefully everybody healthy, is the roster we're going to see opening night?
I think you could argue, or you can make the argument that Justice Winslow was your free agent pickup, for next season. And it's it's kind of hard to evaluate because this roster hasn't played together, because you haven't had Justice Winslow as part of the mix. So I think, I don't see there being anything major here, because guys know their roles, guys like each other, they like being here, the chemistry is really good, and Justice Winslow, by all indications, had really fit into that. So I just don't see any major, earthquake type moves that the Grizzlies would make, simply because they haven't seen everything that they want to see from this particular group.
Oh, and one of those guys in that group, you mentioned Nurkic. What a battle he had with Jonas Valanciunas. I don't understand why Valanciunas doesn't get more credit. Give me your sense of his place on that team.
I don't think Toronto ever gave him a whole lot of credit. He had him coming off the bench.
I know.
He's an anchor. He's a physical presence. People will talk about Jaren Jackson with a low rebound per game average. Well, a big reason is why Jonas gets all the rebounds,
right?
And that's his role on this team. He does play a little bit of the role that Marc Gasol did, with elbow touches, initiating the pick and roll at the top of the key or at the elbow. Good passer, obviously excellent rebounder, good defensive instincts, and good mobility, and young. And does have the ability to hit the three, although certainly that's not his best skill. One of the most accurate hook shot shooters in our league, and one of the most active in putbacks. When you look at all those list of second chance points and guys with putback baskets, Jonas is right at the top of the list because he's always on the offensive glass.
I love the guy. I just don't. I've thought he's been taken out for defensive liabilities on occasion, but you say he's a good defensive player?
Yeah, when he's got the matchup, you
right.
can put a little on him, and going right at him and challenging his mobility a little bit. But one-on-one, it's going to be a battle with Nurkic. It's going to be a battle with Whiteside, and he can more than hold his own in those situations. And one of the things that you will hear from guys in the locker room, he's one of the funniest guys in the locker room, and everybody just gravitates toward him, and they love playing with him because he's got a very, very dry sense of humor, but it's definitely there, and it endears him to his teammates.
We made our own picks here just a little bit ago. Who do you like in the East? Who do you like in the West in these NBA playoffs?
I'm probably going to go Toronto and Clippers. I'm not totally sold on the Lakers right now, and without Avery Bradley, that's a big loss as a good perimeter defender. Toronto simply does not have any weaknesses, and they've been there before. I think that gives them a slight edge over Milwaukee.
I'm stunned. I am absolutely stunned. The biggest Milwaukee, Wisconsin homer of all time, and he's picking Toronto over the Bucks. I never would have thought that.
We'll have to see how healthy they all remain. But yeah, I was just so impressed with Toronto, and I guess lasting impressions. And we saw Milwaukee without Giannis and a lot of guys. And they weren't very good. I just think Toronto top to bottom. I would see Toronto and Milwaukee going into a 7-game series, and you could pretty much flip a coin. That's the thing, too, when you talk about are you disappointed not making the playoffs with a 3.5-game lead. Your last 3 games were Boston, Toronto, and Milwaukee. Yeah. 3 of the best defensive teams in the NBA. The schedule maker did not do the Grizzlies any favors. And back to the point about playing all 82 and maybe not making it in, you had 2 games with Toronto left, and a game with Boston, and a game with Milwaukee, right, and 2 with New Orleans, and 2 with Portland. So, you ended up facing some very, very good defensive teams down the stretch. And Toronto, they don't have any gaps. They are super solid.
They are. Pete, as always, we appreciate it. We'll have to get you on to talk about 901 FC one day. Well, they just can't hold on to a lead.
That Saturday night went from euphoria to frustration in about 17 minutes.
There you go. Pete, stay healthy, my friend. We'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
You got it.
Appreciate it, Pete.
That is Pete Pranick, the TV voice of the Grizzlies, brought to you in part by the Germantown Commissary and the Collierville Commissary, and we love talking about that place. We love ribs, we love chicken, we love tamales, we love pulled shoulder. They do it all. They do it all beautifully, and they've got a signature. Nobody else that I know of does it like they do. The deviled eggs. People talk about the deviled eggs at the Germantown Commissary. I like to talk about the banana pudding. My friend Stats likes to talk about the lemon icebox pie. They've got so many good things, and they make it so easy for you. If you want to go in, they are doing spacing, both restaurants, Germantown in that little quaint area of Germantown, or in Collierville, the newer store. That is at Poplar and Houston Levy Road. That one's got a drive-through. You got to go curbside if you're picking up in Germantown. They are still doing it all, making it great for you. By what a beautiful day to sit in the patio in Collierville. I mean, how about getting a local brew with some ribs right now outside with spacing? That's perfect. It's all perfect. At the Germantown Commissary and the Collierville Commissary. We'll wrap it up with Crunch Time in just a minute.
Take Sports 56 with you on Sports Time on Sports 56 with Waldo and Stats. This hour of Sports Time is brought to you by DeSoto Auto Sales. Here once again are Dave Woloshin and Brad Norsworthy.
Final portion of this Monday edition. We've got two winners in the NBA. The Nuggets in overtime over the Jazz. 135 scored there by the Nuggets. Raptors beat the Nets regulation, 134-110. getting a lot of points scored in the bubble in the playoffs. So far, Game 3 already underway. It's 14-14 midway through the first quarter between the 76ers and the Boston Celtics. This final portion of the show brought to you by the Spirit Shop. Weekend's over. You've got to stock up with the greatest of spirits or the best of bargains. That's where you go see my friend Eddie Connor, his family. They are at 4848 Poplar Avenue. You know, that's Poplar and St. Nick. It's that little log cabin right down from Clark Tower. You've seen it for years. They have the best in wine. They have the best in bourbon, the best in tequila. They got every accessory you could possibly want. They have beer, and they have knowledge. They can talk to you about the classics. They can talk to you about the up-and-comers. They can talk to you about the bargains. And they love to chat with you. They've been doing it since 1969. So if you're restocking up for the weekend, go see my friends at the Spirit Shop. It is crunch time.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
This is for all the biggest crunch time.
You are looking live. In your life have you seen anything like that?
We'll take questions again for the student athletes at this time, please.
What's happening, big dog? How you doing?
Is this thing working?
It's obviously crunch time.
Hammer, nail, coffin. This baby is over.
Woo! Woo!
Time for Taco Bell Crunch Time. Taco Bell, home of the crispy tortilla chips, topped with a double portion of either seasoned beef or shredded chicken, plus refried beans, nacho cheese sauce, reduced fat sour cream, guacamole, and a 3-cheese blend. Nachos Bel Grande, heaping portion of chips, topped with ground beef, tomatoes, beans, nacho cheese sauce, and a dollop of sour cream. Taco Bell, home to great food you get on your way home real fast, and they bring you crunch time every day.
Learn today, we've got a new Monday Night Football team. I love it. Steve Levy, who deserves the play-by-play chair, Louis Riddick, and Brian Greasy, who's been Steve Levy's partner on college football and some of the NFL games. That is your new team with Lisa Salters on the sideline. No offense to Joe Desator or Booger McFarland. This team, to me, is by far a superior, polished team than they were.
You're telling me that's better than Screaming Joe? And, hey, Joe, it's 4th and 5. They've got to get 5 yards here or they lose the ball type of analysis that Booger McFarland would give sometimes. But what I learned today that I definitely should have gone down to Tunica over to Southland before MLB season and placed a bet on my Baltimore Orioles, who are 12-9 right now.
Oh, yeah.
And before the season, at some sites, you could have gotten 300 or 400 to 1 odds. Now, at some sites at casinos across the country, their odds are as low as 65 to 1.
Well, they when you first got that number, they didn't have as many playoff teams either.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, the Orioles are truly a great story. I could have done without the story today at North Carolina. They're going to have to go back to virtual classes starting on Wednesday after just too many outbreaks of COVID. And we learned today from Channel 3 that Harding Academy has some cases of COVID, and this comes right in the middle of numbers actually going down in Memphis, and we've got high school football coming up on Friday.
Mm-hmm. I could have done without the cancellation of the CFL this year. This will be the first time no team will raise the Grey Cup since 1919, when the CFL did not crown a champion, from 1916 to 1919, due obviously to World War I and, of course, a global pandemic.
Well, this pandemic, they wanted a loan from the Canadian government. The government said no.
Didn't get it.
And they are not going to have it. We want to thank those who participated with us today: Ted Butler, David Cobb, George Offman, Anthony Sane, and Pete Pranica. We got a big show coming your way tomorrow that will include the likes of Gabe Kuhn, Brent Beard, Ron Tillery, Bo Marchant, and Drew Hill back from the bubble. Thank you for joining us today. We'll do it again tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.
Do you know one of the best things you can do for your employees or family's health? Provide Arctic Clear bottled water. Arctic Clear bottled water is your locally owned and operated bottled water provider. Arctic Clear is 100% natural spring water with free delivery and setup, dependable service, and no long-term contracts. What an easy choice. Call Jeff Manus today, 901-382-2363, or visit arctic-clear.com. Arctic Clear bottled water. Call now, 382-2363. That's 382-2363.
And now a game of Commercial Chicken, brought to you by Progressive, where we see how long Flo can go without talking about insurance. Ready? Go.
Oh, hi. Okay, guess we should talk about something. Kind of tough to be put on the spot. Not sure what to say. But I know what I'm definitely not talking about. Drivers who switch to Progressive could save big.
Okay, you win. We can't help but save customers money. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Hi, this is Troy Fiveash, owner of Fiveash Roof Services. You've heard me talk about how we offer the best products, the best warranties, and the best services for years. Now let's talk about pricing. Pricing should never be the only reason you hire a contractor, but in today's world, pricing is always a consideration. So we suggest you get 2 or 3 estimates for your roof replacement from a reputable, licensed, and insured company, and then give us a call. If we can't beat your best price for a comparable roof system by more than $100, we'll give you $100. It's that simple. We are so sure we can offer you the best price, beating all other qualified companies, we will hand you $100 if we can't, and thank you for the opportunity. So give us a call. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Make $100? Fiveash Roof Services, a proud supporter of Tiger Athletics and the official roofer of the Tigers home team. Fiveash Roof Services, fair, honest, and ethical. 367-0050 or memphisroofer.com.
Fiveash Roofing, it's what we do. We're here for you.
I'm here with the great Pat Donahue from the Rendezvous Restaurant Shipping Department.
Thanks, Brett. We've been shipping our ribs all over the country now for decades from our USDA-inspected shipping kitchen in the Pinch District. We hand-cook our ribs in pits that Mr. Charlie built over charcoal, just like they do at the restaurant.
So what comes in a rib box?
We could do pork shoulder, we could do ribs, our sauce, seasoning, baked beans, coleslaw. We'll even throw in Pancho's cheese dip with our nacho boxes. We also put a bag of Rendezvous seasoned popcorn, heating instructions, some chef hats, some wet naps, and some other helpful tips from our kitchen. We ship our ribs overnight, exclusively FedEx. And we put them in nice packaging. We don't ever want to use styrofoam, so we use corrugated cardboard, actually 2 boxes that fit nice together, so the ribs get to you, your loved ones, or your clients in a safe, wholesome manner. Rendezvous ribs are perfect for out-of-town clients, customers, loved ones. We also ship ribs for any occasion.
Where do we order these great ribs?
You can go to www.hogsfly.com or give us a call at 1-888-464-7359.
Charlie Burgos' Rendezvous Restaurant in the alley since 1948.
We are Sports 56 WHBQ Memphis, WIVG FM Tunica Memphis, and WPGFL